Good evening, and welcome to this, the final regular meeting of the 2017-2018 Orange County Board of Commissioners season. It's good to see everyone here. Capacity crowd at the Southern Human Services Center. If you can't see this on TV, there's about 20,000 people here. It's the biggest crowd we've ever had. So it's good to see everyone. Before we get started, are there any additions or changes to the agenda? All right. There's one thing we might want to do actually is consider moving up the Animal Services Advisory Board appointments, because I think, is Bob Morato here? Yes, I see him in the back. So that is item 11D. There's been a request to move that up if possible. And with the board's indulgence, I suggest we could do that. How about at item 4G? 4G, which would be after all the presentations and before the regular agenda.
Do you want to add this to the agenda?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. So let's just first take care of the moving up 11D. Is there any?
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we're going to move 11D, the Animal Services Advisory Board, to 4G. And then, thank you, Barry. I meant to send this around earlier, but you know, the best laid plans. There's a resolution regarding Senate Bill 75, which proposes amending the North Carolina Constitution to cap the income tax rates. So I know folks will want time to look at that. So why don't we put that on the agenda at 4H. That way we'll have a little bit of time for people to look at it before we get to it, instead of just in board comments. Is that acceptable?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that draft resolution will be at 4H, and I know it's we are trying not to do these things quickly, but this is pending legislation that is being considered possibly as early as tomorrow, so. All right, so any other changes to the agenda? If not, then we will go on to our arts moment. And I don't see Katie Murray here.
No, she's not.
Okay.
My name is Anita Mills, and I'm happy to represent the Orange County Arts Commission this evening.
Outstanding. Well, welcome, Anita, and why don't you introduce our featured artist?
Yes, tonight we are hosting Ross White, who is the author of two chapbooks, How We Came Upon the Colony by Unicorn Press, 2014, and The Polite Society, also by Unicorn Press from 2017. His poems have appeared in American Poetry Review, New England Review, Poetry Daily, Tin House, and the Southern Review, among others. His manuscript in progress, Guilt Ledger, was selected by Edward Hirsch to receive the 2016 Larry Levis Postgraduate Stipend from Warren Wilson College. He teaches creative writing at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and you can follow him on Twitter at Ross White. Ross White.
Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the chance to speak with you tonight. I've got one poem for you, and it's a poem written to call out a bad habit, one that I share, of going on Facebook to post some passionate thoughts about what's going on in our world and then feeling like I've accomplished something. So I offer this poem with deep thanks to those like this board who are actually working to make a difference in our communities. It's called Taking It. Woke is the new drag, a bouffant wig and stiletto heels, and a stage you can't see the edges of, and therefore you perform it whenever you think anyone's watching, at least for a while. Then some other diva wears a backless dress over scars, knotted and thick, and she strikes a pose almost as indifferent as the escaped slave Gordon. And so you relegate yourself to performing on Thursday and Saturday nights and posting pics from those performances on Instagram throughout the week. Woke isn't justice, and it isn't change if you compensate with your left foot when the right is off balance, or if you play dead when the predator prowls your comfortable savanna. Try talking woke and white privilege to a West Virginia miner who just lost his arm. Tell his still purple stump. Whisper to the thready flesh bulging between the mazes and quilt work of stitches about intersectionality. You can be right all you want in this world and still not know the difference between crickets and cicadas, the clatter and thrum of twilight. His chief privilege is taking it. The nights when his ex-wife leans across the table to cut his steak, the afternoons of painkillers, of knuckleheads pleading their cases to a television judge, and the insinuation that anyone who's never met him might know what's in his heart. And he's eager to hear of your race to parade in pictures and informative think piece links how woke you are when you could be putting up, or like he has been, like he always has, shutting up. And forgive me this criticism, because I'm comfortable with taking it too. I have always liked the matinee of accepting things, and liked shaking hands with stoics and silence. I have always preferred the company of silence, and that I'd break it first to deliver critique probably betrays both my own performance of woke, my platforms and spaghetti straps, and how underneath the matte eyeshadow and impossible lashes, the eyes are open, but still in the throes of sleep, feckless and dreamless American sleep. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. That was beautiful. And thanks to the Arts Commission and Katie Murray for making these arts moments possible. We've been, since January, I think, starting each meeting with a minute or two from an Orange County artist reading poetry or verse, and it starts the meetings off right every time. So thank you. We look forward to continuing that in the fall. All right, next we go to public comments. The board we divide the public comments into two sections. One, at this time in the meeting, we'll hear from folks who would like to speak to an item that is not on the printed agenda. If you are here to speak to an item that is on the printed agenda, when we get to that item during the meeting, we'll call you up to the podium and ask for your comments. But at this time, these are for folks who want to speak to an item that's not on the agenda. There's a couple of people that have been signed up. So when I call your name, please come to the podium, and Penny will start the timer when you're ready. First up is Elise Alexander, and then Marilee McTeague.
Hello again. Good evening, Commissioners.
Ms. Alexander, let me ask you just to pull that mic towards your mouth. Okay, thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you again for all of your diligent work for the benefit of Orange County residents. I am here regarding the Keith Arboretum. My name is Elise Alexander, and I have been a resident of Orange County for over 25 years. My home adjoins the Keith Arboretum. I am also the Homeowner Association representative for Bright's Way community, which is right next to the Arboretum. And tonight, I'd like to put into record a critical issue for the responsible use of the Arboretum. This is the apparent misuse of the existing septic system. Currently, according to Orange County records, the Keith Home septic system is approved for residents with 3 bedrooms, not for large groups. It is our understanding, after speaking to an Orange County environmental health representative, that septic system permits are approved in accordance with the number of people using the system. According to the current Airbnb advertisement for the Keith home, there are now 4 bedrooms, not 3, as the septic permit allows. There's also an additional bathroom that has been added. According to advertisements for Aroma and East West Organics, as of 10 a.m. this morning, they are still accepting requests for weddings, corporate events, family reunions, and party events that can exceed 100 persons. They have built a deck onto the house that they specify will seat 100 people. Representatives who book for the Keith Arboretum state that indoor bathrooms are available during large events only by renting the Keith home. The system of the home is approved for residential 3-bedroom use only, not commercial groups of over 100. There would be no way to monitor excessive use of an in-home facility. There are also no bathroom facilities in place for large camping groups. Photos on the internet of the Keith Arboretum show multiple tents on the property adjacent to the Keith home. If the home bathrooms are not being used, are the large group of campers permitted to openly use surrounding lands for elimination purposes? What is the impact on the Arboretum itself if large groups are permitted open elimination? Please note that this property is in the University Lake watershed that provides water to residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Marilee McTeague.
Good evening, I'm Marilee McTighe, and I live on Pickard Mountain near the Keith Arboretum. The community around the Keith Arboretum remains very concerned about the commercial activities on the property, and we have presented the Board of County Commissioners with much information about these activities over the last 2 months. Weddings, corporate events, and large parties continue to be marketed as described by the prior speaker. Airbnb bookings for 4-bedroom dwellings continue, as do charging standard fees for public access to the property via roamer. Environmental health issues related to the bathroom access during events and roamer activities is also a concern. Back in 2006, the Board of County Commissioners took steps that committed Orange County to a conservation easement on the Keith Arboretum property. You agreed and signed a contract that defined the terms of the easement. You committed federal, state, and local tax dollars to acquire the easement, extinguish the development rights, and prohibit commercial activities. This funding included the cost of an appraisal, which was allowed the owner of the land at that time to take federal tax deduction and state tax credit. And most importantly, you agreed to preserve and protect the conservation values of the easement area and enforce the terms of this conservation easement in perpetuity. So what's different now? Well, a transition is taking place, and properties with conservation easements are now changing hands, and developers are moving into the rural part of the county. The role of the Lands Legacy Program must change in response to these new circumstances, and it will require more time and effort placed on the enforcement of the conservation easement terms and values. We all know that weak interpretation of the easement terms lacks enforcement, and looking the other way when violations occur will only set precedents that will make it harder to protect the conservation values of these properties over time. So where do we go from here? We believe that the Board of County Commissioners needs to take steps to ensure that land within Orange County conservation easements is protected into the future. We ask that you double down on your commitment to the protection of these lands by, number one, developing a strong policy statement that articulates your commitment to the strict enforcement of conservation easements held by Orange County. Number two, commissioning a working team of Board of County Commissioners members to review and recommend enforcement actions for the Keith Arboretum. Number three, instructing the county attorney, county manager, and staff to conservatively read, proactively monitor, and strictly enforce the terms of all conservation easements held by the county, including the use of litigation. I'd like to close by letting you know that we are a very active and committed group of community members who have grown up around the Keith Arboretum, raised families here, and been stewards of this land for decades. We are tenacious and do not shy away from challenges, as many of you already know from past experiences. We will continue to monitor, investigate, report issues, and advocate strict enforcement of all conservation easements. It is our goal to protect the conservation value of this area, and we will continue towards the attainment of that goal for the next few decades. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McTighe was the last person signed up to speak at this time. So I think, well, I can wait till board comments to follow up on that. So why don't we move into board comments, and then I'll at my turn, I'll suggest some follow-up, unless, of course, others are welcome to as well. So let's go to board comments now, and again, we'll try to keep it to 3 minutes per commissioner. Renee?
Two things. One, there were possibly four gentlemen from the Netherlands that visited Orange County, and Commissioner Rich and I met with them, and we had, along with staff, and I know that they visited the town of Chapel Hill as well as some other places. And I must say, we had a really good conversation. They were really interested in seeing Orange County, the place that was named after one of their folks. And I think what was really significant was that in speaking with us and getting to know people individually, we were able to dispel some of the negativity that often surrounds North Carolina and the United States because of some of the governmental actions. But nonetheless, I think they had a really good time, and they talked about coming back. The second thing that I want, and I'm sure Commissioner Rich can add to that, the second thing that I wanted to mention is that today is being June 19th, is also Juneteenth, and it's a day that Africans and African American people held as slaves in Texas were informed that they were free. They were supposedly the last to know. The word had finally gotten to them that the war was over and that they were free. And it's our Freedom Day, and it should be a day of celebration. Yet, here we are 153 years later, we still have vestiges of slavery still here in America. People are still held in psychological bondage, and we deal with human trafficking across the United States, North Carolina, the world. So as much as I'd like to say Happy Juneteenth, I think it is, a reminder for us that we are free, but we have a long way to go. And it's also quite troubling when I also see some of the things that happen to people that had been enslaved, African Americans and Indians, that now we have at our border, southern border, a president that is enforcing ripping children away from their parents and totally, wrecking families. It is one of the most inhumane things I've ever heard of. But there we have it.
Thanks.
And I think Commissioner Jacobs has even a follow-up to that.
Yes, first a few items that I wanted to bring to the board's attention. One is I attended a direct care worker event called SHARP that the Department on Aging held. It's people who work with seniors or who give direct care to people who need help, and it was a wonderfully uplifting group of people. And I think we should be proud of the Department on Aging for hosting it. It was the 4th annual, and as we know, when we do some of these events, people who are ordinarily overlooked especially appreciate being recognized. We also had the dedication of the Philip Nick Waters Emergency Services building last Friday. Mr. Waters served almost 15 years as the Director of Emergency Services for Orange County, and I'll continue to say the love and respect that the people who worked for him had was inspirational then, and it's still inspirational now. I attended a meeting representing this board about the Chapel Hill BRT, and I have two copies of the PowerPoint that was handed out to us. And essentially, it's in the process of winnowing down options. The consultant is recommending that we not have BRT to Durham Tech and the UNC Hospital, not having the BRT in the middle of MLK Boulevard. There's about 30% of the engineering that's done. They'll start to have public information sessions at the end of this month and on and off through the summer. And we're still on a cycle till late 2019 to approve it. And finally, I told our Visitors Bureau Director that I would mention that we have a beautiful neighborhood guide of the county, and I have it right here on the floor of my car outside, so you're welcome to look at it, and it's on the UNC website as well. And I need to mention that I think we need to have a conversation about the Article 46 sales tax and the economic developments and how they work together, either before our September 13th meeting with Mebane, which doesn't leave us much time, or certainly shortly thereafter, because there are some issues that need to be addressed. And then I asked Mr. Hunt to put up this picture. I want to congratulate Governor Cooper for withdrawing the 3 National Guardsmen who were patrolling the border of Texas and Mexico. This image should stick in the mind of everybody when we get to Independence Day and we think about what kind of country we are and what kind of country was founded and how far this policy is from who we are. And we should all remember this and take seriously what we believe our country ought to be. And that's not it. Thank you.
Mark?
I just heard the governor of Maryland followed suit and pulled National Guard from there too, so hopefully that spreads. But one little bit of good news that I really appreciate, I don't know how many of you all know that Hillsborough Amtrak station is in our future as part of our transit plan. So you'll be able to go to the Amtrak station in Hillsborough and go to Burlington, Charlotte, Florida, New York, Raleigh. And it recently, some bizarre negotiations with the railroad had the construction of that stalled out, but that's been resolved, so it's back on track to get moving. In 2019, I think it's going to start construction. It won't take too long. So you might be able to take a train to far away and close places by 2020.
Penny?
Yes, for those that don't know what BRT means, it's Bus Rapid Transit, so I just wanted to make sure that we said that, because we have a room full of folks that might not know that. I have 2 things. One is sort of a petition, or maybe it's just a communication thing. I'd like to see the SWAG and the CFE get together.
What do those stand for?
The Commission for the Environment, and the SWAG is the Solid Waste Advisory Group, to talk a little bit more about recycling. As recycling changes in the future, thank you. It's just so easy to say the acronym.
That'd be the CFE when it was joined together.
So I'd just like for them to get together to maybe propose some changes that we might want to look into. And I know that you two are on the SWAG now, so I don't know if you want to add anything to that. But I think it's time that I know we've done it in the past, but I think it's time that we work it a little bit more to try and get some replies. David, am I not picking up? Is that why you're?
I think we've got electronics next to one of the microphones.
Okay. We're good. And then the second one is, I just want to tell a feel-good story. On June 6th, I got a call from a resident. One of her friends was being released from rehab, and she is in her stage 4 breast cancer, and she couldn't walk anymore, and she couldn't get in and out of her house because her house had steps. And so I called Chapel Hill Planning Department right away to see if we could get them to waive the permit process to getting a ramp built. And that happened that night within 2 hours. And we always hear how government doesn't get together and do things, but that happened within 2 hours. And then we moved to DSS to see if we can find a ramp. Or if we had to build a ramp. We had the Chapel Hill Fire Department come out and take a look to make sure that if the ramp was going to be built, it was going to be built to spec, that she could be safe getting in and out. We went to Nancy Costin helped, and then we went to the sheriff's office. The sheriff called David Caldwell in. David Caldwell went over to the house and said, we need to build this ramp right away. And we called Archie Daniels and his guys in. And we had about 10 volunteers that following Monday and Tuesday building a ramp. And they did a fabulous job. The deputies were there building, so please pass along those thanks to your fellow deputies. And so within under a week, we had this ramp built. And it just goes to show that if we all sort of put our efforts together for someone that really needed something, we can get it done, and we did. So I just want to thank everyone along the steps of the way that helped out, especially Archie Daniels for organizing y'all. And this is a program that's usually for seniors that get housebound. This woman is 44, she's not a senior, but you know, everybody stepped up to the plate, and it was really, it's a feel-good story that she's able to get in and out of her house.
Earl?
Yes, a couple of things, and I will defer to the chair, maybe to make put forward a path forward on this allegations related to the Keith Arboretum. But I would say that my inclination would be to have the attorney and the inspections follow up on these allegations immediately. If they prove to be true, that action be taken on it. If they prove not to be true, that we in the community are notified, particularly the folks that have brought this to our attention. But I think that just hearing this, if these allegations are true, they rise to the level of taking action. The second thing I'll mention, maybe community interest. I work a project that is directly adjacent to Chapel Hill High, and almost as soon as the last school bus was out of the parking lot when school recessed for the summer, the contractors were in and on the project and are working. So there's a lot of work going on in the last 2 weeks. Particularly this week, there's some radical changes already been made. The third thing that I'll mention is for the board's interest. As the board is aware, we've received an email from a neighbor of the Economic Development District in Hillsborough. I had a long conversation with that gentleman today, and he has invited any board member or all the board members that will to contact him and possibly come and take a little tour with him over his concerns. So I'll leave it at that.
Mia?
So I just wanted to make note of something that was very deep in our packets, which is good news. The Family Success Alliance, via the Health Department, applied to the Keenan Charitable Trust and received $300,000 over 3 years. So that's a huge win for them, and we've been concerned about trying to make that more broadly funded than the county, and they're really taking excellent steps. So kudos to them.
Indeed. All right. So I was going to, along the same lines as Earl, ask that we could get some information quickly about investigation of the issues that have been presented around the Arboretum, and also an update on what we've already done, and also some information about what are the enforcement steps that can be taken, and how those are taken should, as Earl said, should that prove to be the case. I mean, we hear a lot about, there's a lot of aspects of our ordinances that are complaint-driven, right? We don't have the opportunity to go out and necessarily visit every site and inspect everything. And so once we get those complaints, I think it's imperative that we follow up on those. So if we could get some information back quickly, that would be ideal. Is that all right? Is that? Okay, good. Your silence is very reassuring. No, I'm kidding. No, good. So we could get that as quickly as possible. Be great. All right, and I just wanted to follow up. Did you say that in your bus rapid transit report that the going to Durham Tech is not being recommended?
Correct.
Okay. So that's something worth looking at again, I think.
Well, I talked about how Durham Tech has expansion plans, and the hospital has expansion plans, and they were using 2013 figures to do projections, which is, as someone pointed out, projecting backwards. But right now, they estimated 50 additional riders at a cost of $500,000, so it was not recommended. But I'm sure that the numbers will change as some of these projects come online.
So let's just make sure Theo and others are continuing to monitor that and that they have the most updated data and statistics, and let's make sure Durham Tech is involved in those conversations as well.
Yes.
All right, there's one other item on, as far as the agenda goes. Someone is here and signed up to speak on item 11F, and we try not to, that's going to be a long time from now, and we try not to make folks wait that long if we can avoid it. That's the Orange Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors appointment. So does the board have any interest in moving that up to, say, item 4I?
So move.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that'll be 4I. So now we're up to 4I. All right. Excellent. All right, with that, we'll move on to proclamations, resolutions, and special presentations. First up, we have a proclamation recognizing the Chapel Hill High School women's soccer team winning the 2018 state championship. The board will consider voting on approving a proclamation recognizing the the Chapel Hill High School women's soccer team winning the state championship. If all those of you who are here for that, please come up to the podium.
So I'm going to read the proclamation to y'all.
Well, before you do that, why don't we see if Coach Curtis wants to make any comments or Todd McGee wants to make any comments, and then we'll read the proclamation.
I'm Coach Benson, representing the other coaches. They're all on vacation, and somehow I didn't get to go on vacation. Coach Curtis is the head coach. We have Coach Boyle and Coach Shoden and Coach Benson, myself. So I'm representing the coaches.
And why don't you introduce who you brought with us, who is here with us?
All right. We have two captains, Michaela and Elise. Step forward, please. Thank you very much. Our midfielder, Ella Matichek, and Audrey Calhoun, our goalkeeper. Come on, Audrey. And we have twins, and I have to see what this is. See, this is Maddie, because she has blue shoes on. And this is Claudia, because she has black. Did I get backwards? Did I get it right? Sometimes I get it right. There are twins here. And we have Liz Ball, whose sister was on the 2014 championship team, by the way. And Holly Heiser. And we have Kira Teston, whose sister also was on the 2014 team. And we have, let's see here. And we have, let's see, I think I looked at my list here. Caitlin, not Austin, she's not here tonight. Caitlin Grubbs, sorry. Caitlin Grubbs. And a couple other things. We have 2 goals scored on this year, 19 wins, 1 loss, and 1 tie. And we thought that was noteworthy. Some other noteworthy things is the girls have won 2 state championships. The guys have won 4. Guys last fall won. So in 1 year, the Chapel Hill High School has won the men in the fall and the women in the spring. And thank you very much.
Outstanding. And now I'll ask Mark to read the proclamation.
Proclamation of recognition on Chapel Hill High School women's soccer team winning the 2018 state championship. Whereas on May 26, 2018, the Chapel Hill High School women's soccer team won the North Carolina High School Athletic Association's 3A state championship with a hard-fought 1-0 victory over Cox Mill High School. And whereas the team completed its season with a 19-1-1 record, allowing only 2 goals all season. That's amazing right there. Whereas under the guidance of Coach Jason Curtis, the team won its 2nd state championship along with the 2014 title. And whereas through hard work, dedication, teamwork, and commitment, the team brought honor upon themselves, Chapel Hill High School, the Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools District, and Orange County. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Orange County Board of Commissioners expresses its sincere appreciation and respect for the Chapel Hill High School women's soccer team and Coach Curtis for their outstanding achievement and their inspiration to youth across North Carolina through their dedication, teamwork, and athletic prowess. Congratulations. I will move that we approve this proclamation.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded to approve the proclamation. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Please come up, accept the congratulations of the board. Just make a line like at a wedding. Go down the line.
Yeah, of course.
Way to go.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Congratulations, you got them all.
I'm glad you got your name right.
All right, next up, we're going to have a proclamation recognizing the Carborough High School men's tennis team for winning the 2018 state championship. So if that team will come forward with their coach.
And I was asked to point out one thing about this team besides the athletic prowess. They have the second highest GPA of any team in the state of North Carolina for the spring season of all tennis teams in the state. So that should also be
nice.
Commended.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that had nothing to do with me. But I like to consider myself in that range of intelligence. They had an incredible season this year. This is our third state championship for the boys. A couple of outstanding players here with us tonight. Our number one player has been with us for 4 years, played with me for 4 years, and he was the All-Conference Player of the Year, All-Regional, All-State, and won the State Doubles Championship, and was the MVP of the State Championship. That's Zach Anderson. Also, starting here in our lineup tonight is Cal Barrick. He's a freshman and played number 5 on the team and did an excellent job winning a number of occasions when it was critical for us. We managed to defeat our nemesis, North Carolina School of Science and Math. And I'm happy to say that apparently we were smarter than those guys, too. We'll get them any way we can. Cal was all-conference and made it to the second round of the state championship in an outstanding performance. Here he is right here, freshman. Great to have him around for a few years. Playing number 6 for us was John Blobe, a sophomore, rising junior, and did an outstanding job executing big time for us in the clutch at the state championship. At number 6, winning, I think it was 1 and 2, something like that. Crushed the guy at number 6, and it was a little discouraging for the folks from Brevard. John, here. Also, some of his classmates have joined us. Ike Bryant, Brennan Nichols, all right, guys. James O'Brien. Wait, James played in the state championship as well in doubles and helped us out on a number of occasions. And Will Brady. We've got some great tennis ahead of us, and hopefully I'll be around to do that. Thanks for having us, guys.
All right.
Just to invite all of you to, speaking of concerns that we're all speaking of here, there will be a meeting about Bowland Forest on the 21st. I believe it's at Smith, June 21st. And I think it would be really sad for us to drive across that railroad track coming up Sewell School Road and see a giant patch of open earth versus that beautiful forest that we see right now. Thank you.
All right, let's get Commissioner Burrows to read the proclamation and move it.
Excuse me. Whereas on May 19th, 2018, the Carborough High School men's tennis team won the North Carolina High School Athletic Association's 2A state championship with a 5-2 victory over Brevard High School. And whereas the team completed its season with a 16-2 record, and whereas doubles team Zach Anderson and Andre Javin, thank you, also won the 2A state championship in the individual competition. And whereas under the guidance of Coach John Noyes, the team won its third state championship in the past 5 years, along with the 2014 and 2015 championships. And whereas through hard work, dedication, teamwork, and commitment, the team brought honor upon themselves, Carborough High School, the Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools District, and Orange County. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Orange County Board of Commissioners expresses its sincere appreciation and respect for the Carborough High School men's tennis team and Coach Noyes for their outstanding achievement and their inspiration to youth across North Carolina through their dedication, teamwork, and athletic prowess, and I will add academic performance. This, the 19th day of June 2018. I move the proclamation.
Second.
Proclamation has been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. That passes 7-0. Please come up, accept the plaque and the appreciation of the board.
Congratulations, sir.
Thanks so much.
Congrats.
Aye. Aye. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is recognition of community heroes. The board will consider commending recent life-saving actions by Orange County residents with recognition and with a presentation of certificates to those who provided assistance. Kim Woodard and Chief Dinah Jeffries are here to make a presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners, County Manager. It's very rare that we get to recognize our responders, but it's even rarer that we get to recognize our community participants. This is two examples of almost the perfect chain of survival. And it makes me extremely proud to be in Orange County. Assistant Chief Kim Woodward is going to give a brief description of both events, and we'll have the responders as well as the community heroes that the families come up to be recognized.
Good evening, Commissioners. On May 19th in Chapel Hill, two individuals, Savannah Jastrom and Norman Picard, saw two young girls in the University Garden Apartments pool on Pritchard Avenue Extension. They heard one of them call for help and said, "Help, I can't breathe." Jastrom and Picard ran to the pool and climbed the fence. Picard kicked off her flip-flops, jumped into the pool, and retrieved the young girl while Jastrom dialed 911. The girl was initially unconscious, and she was not breathing. There was a brief episode of CPR, and the girl quickly regained consciousness. Chapel Hill Police, Chapel Hill Fire, and Orange County Emergency Services, EMS, and the telecommunicators all responded to this scene. And the young girl was transported quickly to UNC hospitals where she had a full recovery. So we would like to recognize the responders with Chapel Hill PD that are here tonight. We'd also like to recognize South Orange Rescue Squad, who helped man that ambulance that transported this young lady. So they're here tonight. the individuals, our community heroes, could not be here tonight. They're on vacation, a well-earned vacation. They have been presented with challenge coins from both the Chapel Hill Police Department and Chapel Hill Fire Department, and will be presented challenge coins from our agency as well. Our second call, I'm going to bring a slew of people up here as I talk about this call. So let's see, where are our community heroes? Oh, here they are. Okay, you guys can come on up. Okay. We're going to go back in time just by a few days. On May the 12th, the Tyson family was enjoying their first excursion to the Churton Grove Community Pool. Only feet away from their 4-year-old son, Parker, Mr. Tyson called out for his son and looked over and found his son unresponsive. Thankfully, he was talking to Dr. Scaria at the time, and she quickly jumped in to help. Dr. Scaria found that Parker had no pulse and was not breathing. Dr. Scaria began CPR and was quickly assisted by Gabe Walker, who has some lifeguard training and CPR training that he obtained in Chapel Hill. These two right here, they are really the first link in the chain of survival. And because of their actions, Parker is with us today, a very healthy, active 4-year-old. So we want to recognize our community heroes, as well as Shelly Higgins and Ryan O'Connor, who I'm trying to get up here, who got on the scene extremely quickly. The Orange Rural Fire Department and the Orange County Sheriff's Office also provided assistance, and Parker was quickly transported to the hospital again, where they had a very harrowing time, but he made a full recovery. We have a very sweet video to show you guys.
Thank everybody for saving our son's life, as it meant the world to us. We especially wanted to thank Anita and Gabe, who responded so quickly, the telecommunicators who communicated to all of the emergency services. We wanted to thank EMS, the fire department, and the sheriff for coming and responding. And we especially wanted to thank the team at Duke Hospital who helped us through the night. Thank you, everybody, and
thank you.
I thank you for letting me have just a moment to share some of my reflections from this moment as a witness to the events that happened prior, during, and post. I will never forget Mother's Day 2018. It's every parent's worst nightmare because we realize we cannot protect our babies no matter how hard we try. And we read about these things and we hear about this on the news and we feel sorry, but to be an active witness to it leaves an indelible mark. Parker, I've had the privilege of knowing since he's 2, which has been only 2 years, but he is the most loving, a little mischievous, fearless, and adorable boy. David and Katie Tyson are the most loving, nurturing, attentive parents you will find. So when this happens to a family like this who are right there in the pool, it can happen to anyone. Now, despite this horrific situation, 3 beautiful things came out of this, and I want to share that with you. The first was that, one, a community came together. Everyone played a role. We had CPR, I assessed, Gabe compressed. We even had a 3rd person who helped us with breaths, and I don't even know who it was, but we thanked him. Someone called EMS. Someone went to go look for an AED. First responders, EMS, were there quickly, and they were able to give him oxygen, stabilized him, and carried him to the hospital. And there was a contingent of desperate poolside prayers and prayers afterwards that were answered even beyond what we could have asked for. And I'm 1,000% certain of that because as a physician, I've cared for kids who've gone through these kind of situations. And even with the best efforts, there are sequelae. And that can be cognitive impairment, fear, etc., but not with Parker. He's our miracle boy. I can tell you, 45 minutes later after this event, I cried tears of joy to see him eating a popsicle in our bay. And it just blows me away. The second event, that thing that came out of this was that 2 young people realized they have a calling. Gabe is a young man. He's very level-headed. He remembered what he was taught as a lifeguard, and he used that skill and the responsibility in this situation. He was not even at work, and he came out and did that. Not many teenagers have that understanding or have that experience or that understanding that life is short. And so for him to have gone through this, I believe that there's something big on his future and a huge calling for him. So with that knowledge comes responsibility, and I am excited to see his course in his life. Parker, he is still fearless, but wiser. He will not jump into the deeper end of the pool. It takes combination of people who have this combination of fearlessness tempered with knowledge to make great change in this world, and I'm excited for both of their futures. The third beautiful thing that came out of this is we are now getting AED in our community. We did not have one. We did not know we did not have one at the moment, and more people are willing to learn CPR. Again, this can happen in any situation, even to the most attentive parents. It can happen, and it's life-saving. Last thing I would like to say is I would like to say thank you to first responders, EMS, fire department, police department, sheriff's officers. We only get to meet you when we are in moments of crisis, and we don't have that moment, the wherewithal to say thank you, and I want to say thank you. You guys take big risks for us, physically and emotionally, even in these kind of situations, even though you're trained. So I want to say thank you so much. And that's it. Thanks.
We'd like to invite all of our responders up to the front as we present the certificates and our challenge coins.
What is a challenge coin, just for folks who don't know?
A challenge coin holds what we believe on it, and it's our strength, and it's our motto that we share with those.
And challenge coins are very rarely handed to members of the public. It is a true act of heroism that we recognize today.
Community Hero Certificate. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. Community Hero Certificate for you. Thank you.
If we can hear all around this phone.
Yeah, please. Let's get the folks from the department involved. Yeah.
So shy. Really?
Yeah.
Look at the Chapel Hill police guys. They're like, what?
You're the guys, right? You're representing. Yeah. Ready? 1, 2. You two just accept the flag with the thanks and appreciation of the Lord. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Maybe they can comment on that on this real quick. This is for the next
Go ahead.
one, right?
Yes.
So this seems like an opportunity to spread the word on how people can learn CPR. And I know that there are opportunities in the county periodically where the public can learn CPR and first aid. So I think we should, as we publicize this remarkable rescue, we should also publicize the opportunities to learn CPR so that we have more people around who know what to do.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right, well, I think that concludes the handshaking portion of the meeting. And now we'll go on to item 4D, which is the Emergency Services EMS Initiative to Promote Community Well-Being. Nice segue, Mark. And we'll get some information on several emergency medical services initiatives and activities to promote community well-being.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Board of Commissioners. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Joseph Grover. I'm the Medical Director for Orange County Emergency Services. I'm also faculty in the Department of Emergency Medicine at UNC. And as you all know, Kim Woodward is our EMS Operations Manager at Orange County Emergency Services, who was just presenting the most recent awards. I'm happy to talk about a couple of very recent initiatives that we've been working on for over a year that we're finally going to be able to implement. The first thing I wanted to address was behavioral emergencies. So there's a fair amount of press nationally about the opiate and other substance abuse crises that are facing this country, but unfortunately there's not as much press about the behavioral health emergency that we're also facing. Here in Orange County, we've responded to over 135 behavioral health emergencies since January of this year. And unfortunately, I can tell you we're also facing that same crisis in the emergency department as well. Up till now, the only option for dealing with those types of emergencies has been to transport those patients to the emergency department. And I can tell you firsthand as an emergency physician that we don't have the resources to care for those patients if they are not requiring admission to the hospital. Traditionally, our main role in the emergency department has only been to triage. We triage those patients who need emergency admission to a psychiatric institution, and for those who do not, unfortunately, we're pretty much left to discharge them and hope the best that they're going to end up at the right resource. Well, our goal is that that will no longer be the case from the pre-hospital side. We have been in communication for over a year with Freedom House, which is a substance abuse and mental health resource in our community, to try to develop a program where we can actually divert them so that patients wouldn't actually be transported to the emergency department, but instead directly transported to a facility where they can receive treatment, who before otherwise would have been evaluated in our emergency department and otherwise discharged. Effectively, what this means is our pre-hospital providers would evaluate them in the field. If they met our protocol, they would be able to determine that they were safe to be taken away from emergency department and directly to this Freedom House facility. It's taken over a year to implement. As you can imagine, there's a fair amount of training involved with getting this type of protocol functioning. First of all, this is not the traditional role of EMS. EMS has always been trained to transport to an emergency department. And so this does require a fair amount of training for our EMS folks. In addition, it requires cooperation with the Freedom House folks to make sure that we develop a protocol that's in compliance with their admission and their evaluation capabilities. Our goal is for this to start in August. That will be the end of our final level of training for our providers. And so we're looking at a date of mid-August for this to actually go into effect. And so in terms of the facility itself, it has a lot of great resources that we're excited to take advantage of. They have multiple observational chairs that allow for that short-term evaluation period. And once again, we've developed a protocol that fits into their inclusion criteria to make sure that we're taking the right patient to the right facility. This is the protocol that's going to be utilized by our EMS folks, and we've already been effectively training all of our providers to be able to implement this protocol, both in simulation training and also in didactic training. Obviously, the other main initiative that we've been working on is dealing with the opiate crisis. Currently, in Orange County, we have a major problem of opiate abuse, but as you know, it's not just an Orange County problem, it's really a national problem. Here are some statistics for North Carolina alone. We frequently use naloxone administration, so that's the reversal drug for an opiate overdose, as a marker. It's a surrogate marker for overdose. Unfortunately, it's an imperfect marker. So if a patient has normal respirations and is awake, even though they overdosed on an opiate, they would never receive naloxone. And so these numbers really do undervalue the total number of abuses or overdoses of opiates in our community and nationwide. But as you can see, those numbers have been drastically increasing since we've been recording them. In terms of where we're at right now, we're saying about 45 times a day naloxone is administered just here in the state of North Carolina. In terms of Orange County, you can see, thankfully, we have less of a problem than other places around the state, but I would still say that, as we all know, it still exists here. You can see, based on the numbers here in Orange County, that we've seen some drastic increases.
The issue with our opioid crisis, as you can see on this map, that the opioid crisis is really spread out to our population centers. We've just recently also taken a call all the way out as far north as Highway 49. So there is no geographical barrier to this opioid crisis in Orange County. We're very excited that we have members of our law enforcement, all of our law enforcement agencies are carrying naloxone. They have given over, this number has changed since we provided this information to you. Over 33 times law enforcement has reversed an opioid overdose, and that is life-saving. EMS in 2013 administered it 34 times, and in 2017 it jumped to 80 times. So when we look at that in scale, that is a significant increase. Just as of the end of May of this year, we had administered naloxone 32 times, and those are to known heroin overdoses.
Can I ask you a quick question before you go on? So is EMS the only authorized agency to administer this? What about the sheriffs, the police departments? What about non-law enforcement? I know in some states they have, you can become a trained volunteer.
Yeah, so in North Carolina and in Orange County, there is a standing order for naloxone. That means any citizen, any resident can get naloxone without a prescription, and they can carry it. In fact, the Surgeon General of the United States recommends that everyone carries naloxone. That is the level of our crisis. Every law enforcement agency, including the sheriff's office, they carry this naloxone. We have several fire departments that have gone to the naloxone level and have received the training, and they too carry naloxone. So it is nice that we have this layer of response. In the last 2 months, we've had citizens, residents, give naloxone prior to law enforcement. It required law enforcement's naloxone, the residents' naloxone, and EMS's naloxone to get a response from these patients.
This actually brings up our next initiative, actually, for the opiate overdose patients. We have seen a fair number of these patients never get transported to the hospital. When they're reversed, they're back to a normal mental status, and they realize why they unfortunately led to this overdose and decide they don't want to seek help in an emergency department. There's a fair amount of data to demonstrate that it's actually safe for them to refuse care. And so the question then becomes, how do we get them the resources they need to seek out substance abuse centers, to find ways of getting clean needles if they're not ending up in an emergency department? And so thankfully, we have a fantastic North Carolina Office of EMS who've been very proactive with this regard, and they've actually developed a new optional protocol. So this protocol is actually going to be involving patients who refuse medical care. We're going to provide them with a naloxone kit, so this is not just to the patient, but any bystander present who requests the naloxone. And so directly, to answer your question, sir, effectively, we could be giving this to any community member who's requesting it based on this protocol. Similarly, we're also going to give them a clean needle exchange. Now, I can tell you this is the first state protocol in the country to ever involve a clean needle exchange that EMS providers are giving to community members. And so this is quite progressive in terms of EMS. It's also a paradigm shift for EMS. So traditionally, EMS has only been centered on treating emergencies. Well, this is preventative, effectively. This is trying to prevent other infections associated with it. It's going to have significant cost-saving reductions, as we've seen in terms of other clean needle exchange programs around the country. And once again, I think it does require some training, which is what we've been doing as a system, and that's why our start date is not until July, because we've had to do some training just to get them up to speed to this type of protocol. In addition, the information that they're going to get with that naloxone provides them with all the resources of the different substance abuse programs in our region. So that way, that not only are they getting the naloxone for that acute emergency, but they're also going to be given all the resources for how do they seek help if they decide they do want to quit. This is the protocol that we're using for it, and once again, there are some changes that we've made to fit with our fit with our local protocol. So we adapted the state protocol to our own needs.
So as you can see in what we provided for you to take a look at, that is the actual kit that will be provided to these patients that refuse care. In the back of that, you'll see that there was a core pamphlet. We have partnered with the Sheriff's Office. We've partnered with the Health Department to provide additional resource to these folks that are getting reversed by naloxone so that we can let them know that they are not a criminal, that they are a victim of this crisis, and we care about them. So we have member paramedics that are working on their own time in a community paramedic fashion that are doing their level best to reach back out to these individuals, and we're hoping that this gift of naloxone at the time of the overdose will help these folks reach back out. Okay? You run this up to them. You run this up to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Our last initiative, and we're really excited to tell you about this one as well, is we have the first of its kind in the state of North Carolina and possibly the East Coast. This is a DNR bracelet project that was initiated and piloted out with Carol Woods Retirement Center. UNC Hospitals provided the funding to purchase 100 of these bracelets. What's amazing about these bracelets is that it's not the bracelet itself that is the DNR, DNR, it is the data on the bracelet. In the state of North Carolina, we must see that yellow form that we've provided for you guys to take a look at. We must see that, and it has to be signed and in date, and it has to have the patient's information. These bracelets will contain a picture of that patient as well as their active DNR. Again, this is the state's first initiative. The State Office of VMS is extremely excited about this program because a lot of patients who have DNRs are very concerned about what happens to me when I'm not at home where my DNR is displayed.
Yeah.
We've had 3 successful tests of this bracelet. The DNR data is very stable, and so we're excited to move forward. So we will continue to test this bracelet in non-traditional settings. We have 8 information sessions that are geared towards the Carrollwoods resident. We have 250 residents of Carrollwoods who have active DNRs. So we'll be looking forward to purchasing additional bracelets. We have also had a great deal of enthusiasm as we discuss this initiative with our partners at the Department on Aging and with residents of this community. We're here for any questions.
All right, thank you. A very interesting presentation, and appreciate, as always, the county being on the cutting edge of a lot of this stuff. Are there questions for either Kim or Dr. Grover?
Comment.
All right, Mia?
So I appreciate all of this, and I particularly appreciate the DNR bracelet. That, you know, we're very uncomfortable in our culture talking about death, but there are people who don't want to be resuscitated, and we didn't end up having to enforce it. But in the 5 trips back and forth with the hospital with my mother-in-law over the last 2 years, it took a lot of shepherding of that yellow piece of paper, and it was a little clunky. And I think in a real emergency, it might have been really a problem. So thank you for taking on something that's not always culturally easy to deal with, but super important.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Renee?
You might have said this, but what about in the schools within the naloxone? Do they have, are the schools well equipped with them, with the kits?
So I wouldn't be able to answer that. We can certainly reach back to the schools and find out. I do know that there's been a lot of discussion of naloxone throughout the entire community.
Right. Well, we were on the same workshop, but I was just wondering, you know, because there was a young lady and some other folks that had spoken about how, you know, the drugs are in the schools. Or even if they're not in school, they're supposed to be in school, but it's our young folks, so I was just concerned if we could follow up. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Other questions or comments? So I might have missed this, but where's the money come from to buy these bracelets? Is that...
So again, UNC hospitals, particularly UNC Hillsborough, provided the pilot funding. We've budgeted a small amount in this fiscal year to purchase additional bracelets, and we'll be reaching back out to UNC hospitals in the next week or so to purchase additional bracelets.
All right. Anything else? Thank you. Next up, item 4E, resolution supporting net neutrality. The board will consider voting to approve a resolution calling upon the United States Congress and the President to approve and sign legislation to fully restore net neutrality and authorize the chair to sign. Jim Northup and Commissioner Penny Rich are running point on this one, as we say.
Good evening. Jim Northup, Chief Information Officer, Orange County Information Technologies. So, as you know, net neutrality is an important principle that has guided the internet for the past 50 years, let's say, since the 70s. And what basically net neutrality means is that there's no discernment or no throttling of any kind of information across the internet by any vendor. And over the past few years, it's become a hot button item where the FCC, back in 2015, actually wrote into their regulations that internet service providers would be considered a tier 1 telecommunications company. That puts them along the lines of telephone companies where they have to provide service to residents within the United States. Recently, about 2015 again, the FCC, or I'm trying to remember my years here, the FCC recently, I'll just say recently, the FCC withdrew that aspect and made internet service providers a tier 2 provider, which basically does not require internet service to be provided in any way, shape, or form to anyone. So it basically deregulates internet service. And so the concept of net neutrality is really not just the deregulation of the internet to provide to residents of the United States, but it's also the ability to deliver content to anyone that wants it unfettered. So there's no throttling, there's no filtering. So if I'm an internet service provider and I want to provide my content first before my competitors, I'm now allowed to do that without net neutrality in place. And so Commissioner Rich asked that I put together a resolution supporting net neutrality.
Penny, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, we talked about this in agenda review, and Commissioner Dorson said we need to pull something together. So I pulled the team together with Jim and John, and we actually went out to see what kind of resolutions were out there, and there weren't too many, actually. We found one out in California, but there weren't. We searched high and low. We couldn't find it. And one of the reasons I was interested in this is because during the NACO conference in Washington, I'm on the Telecommunications and Technology Committee. That committee refused to vote on supporting net neutrality, and it was really disappointing. So it's an interest of mine. I think broadband should be a utility, as many people do across the country, but not the current administration. So that's where this came from. This is an awfully long resolution. I don't know if I really need to read it, but unless you feel like I do.
Well, I mean,
shall we?
I will defer to the will of the board. Would you like to hear it, since we're going to vote on it?
I read it.
I think that everyone is content with your outstanding work, so.
Awesome. So I'm going to move that we pass this resolution, and with that, I'm going to ask that we send it, of course, to our other counties, but also I'd like it to go a little bit further and make sure that our representatives in Washington get it, as well as the NACO board that did not want to pass this resolution. So I will move that.
Second.
All right, motion for the resolution in support of policies protecting net neutrality has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim and Penny, well done.
And John.
And John. And everyone else who laid hands on. Good work, though, and it's good that we're getting out in front of that. I appreciate it. Next up is item 4F, Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. The board will recognize our budget staff in the Orange County Finance and Administrative Services Department for once again earning the Government Finance Officer Association's Distinguished Budget Award Presentation Award for last year's budget, so the 2017-18 budget. And judging from the one we've got in the queue, we should be getting another one of these next year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gary Donaldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'd like to recognize the budget staff for their excellent work in producing the budget document and also just going through the budget development process. This particular year, we've had several enhancements, and we have been doing several enhancements during the budget process. For instance, this year, the long-term forecast has been added, and that assisted greatly with the submittal of this year's budget. So I'd like to recognize Paul Lawton, Crystal Sandifer, Chaz Offenberg, and Alan Coleman to come be recognized at this time.
Do any of you want to say anything? It's the last meeting of the year. This is.
I'd like to thank my staff, and we work well together as a team, I believe, and they put in a tremendous amount of hours to put together a document that we have in front of you. So I really appreciate their time and efforts and work. I thank Bonnie and Travis and Gary for their leadership and direction. And Orange County is a great place to work with and for, and I enjoy being a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for the incredible work you do. Sort of everything we do comes down to the budget, and it reflects not only what we're going to spend money on and our revenues, but it reflects our values. Budgets have values, and your staff, you all have done a really outstanding job in making sure that that's the case. It is a living, breathing document that represents, I think, the best of Orange County. So with that, I'll bring this plate, this marbleized plaque to you. We're just racking up the awards, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Is this the new one, or will we get an 18 one for this year?
The new one is on there.
It'll
the
be,
one
yeah.
for tonight.
The new one is on there. And
okay, good. So yeah, look at that. So we, 5 more, and then we have to get a new plaque. So. Congratulations.
Yeah, good idea.
Go at halftime before consent agenda. Go wash up. Just don't touch your face.
Just my beard.
Getting workouts tonight. He's excited about this last meeting.
Let me roll along. It's not really the last meeting because
Well,
we have a meeting on Thursday. but
last-ish.
It's the last in this setting. All right. Next up is is what was formerly item 11D, which is now item 4G. 11D is the Animal Services Advisory Board appointments, and our good friend Bob Morato is here. So give us just a second to scroll down to that section of the agenda. So we've got the item in front of us. There are 2 folks being recommended, and then there are some other positions that remain vacant, and I presume that's what you're going to tell us about.
Good evening. The 2 positions that their recommendations in front of you for are the towns of Carrboro and the towns of Chapel Hill. And I think I would just note that in addition to the resolutions you've received from the elected officials in those municipalities, Dr. Daniels and Amanda Schwerke were both highly recommended by the Animal Services Advisory Board based on their experience and/or our interaction with them. At the Animal Services Advisory Board meeting tomorrow night, we will have an applicant from we'll have a couple of applicants. One will be from the retail pet services sector, which is a new position on the Animal Services Advisory Board. And then we also have another applicant who is from the town of Hillsborough, since that person will roll off. So we're working actively to fill the vacancies, and the 2 in front of you this evening are for the towns of Carrboro and Chapel Hill.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? Barry?
So what qualifies one for animal welfare, animal advocacy position?
Well, I think that we've had some discussion of that in the past. I think that members of the current board asked for some clarification of that, and I think it's a broad background, a broad spectrum of people who would qualify for those positions. We certainly have here in our area people who are truly advocates in the legislative arena, in the community arena for animals, for the improvement in the welfare of animals, for animal rights, and so on and so forth. And in addition, we have many people who are actively involved in improving the welfare of animals. Probably the most common example of that is people who are active in some kind of rescue work for animals, but I don't think it's necessarily limited to that. So I think it's a spectrum. I think that we have a lot of opportunities, and we have one other person who attended the May meeting, who I believe is under consideration for that position by the Animal Services Advisory Board as well, who has that kind of experience.
Mr. Chair, I actually have a nomination for that position when you think it's appropriate.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions? I just want to say, as an aside, we are going to have a work session in the early part of the fall where we're going to be discussing advisory boards and the reports that we get. And also one of the topics that is under consideration are these special categories, because we've wrestled back and forth with the advisory board's request to have these and the inability in some cases to fill them. And you may recall, we changed our policy to allow us to bypass those categories after 6 months or a year. I can't remember now, but I think really going 6 months. But going back and looking at for the kind of explanation that we just got on this and for other positions as well. So just so folks know, that'll be happening at a work session in the early part of our season. And there may even be some work to be done on that over the summer. There may be some ad hoc discussions in anticipation of that work session. So, all right, are there any other questions? All right then, so we've got the appointments to make. There are these two recommendations. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chair?
Penny?
I will move for position number 3, Dr. Evelyn Daniel. Position 4, Amanda, oh my goodness, can you? Schwarke.
And it's not Amanda, it's Amanda. There's just a missing N there.
Amanda.
Yes.
Amanda.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Yes, for a second.
So there's been a motion and a second for Dr. Evelyn Daniel for position 3 and Amanda Schwarke for position 4. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0.
And I'd like to nominate Ms. Hahn for the position 9, Animal Welfare, Animal Advocacy. She lists as her, besides being a registered nurse, she's been involved in 4 different animal rescue organizations, 3 for dogs and 1 for equines. And so she seems very attuned to what we would hope for in an animal welfare advocate.
Second.
All right, that motion has been made and seconded. Ms. Hahn's information is at page 578, electronically 20 in this item. I just want to ask a question to Bob. You said that someone had come to a meeting already that you're considering for that position?
And it was indeed Ms. Hahn.
Oh, good. Well, there you go. Excellent. Then I can vote for her with a clear conscience.
They just weren't able to wrap up the discussions.
All right. Any other questions or discussion? Folks need another minute or two? All right, then. Motion's been made and seconded for Ms. Hahn for position number 9, the Animal Welfare, Animal Advocacy position. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is advanced item 4H, which is this resolution that I handed out at the beginning of the meeting. Apologies for not getting it to you sooner. I sent an email about this at the end of last week. I was contacted by several public school advocates who are extremely concerned about Senate Bill 75. Senate Bill 75 will put a referendum on the ballot in November to set a maximum state income tax rate at 5.5%, which is lower than it is now. And the concern is that if that rate is constitutionally capped, then there will be potential significant adverse funding impacts across the board, but particularly for education. And as a result, those funding needs will be required to be filled by county governments. I mean, we've already experienced that to some extent just in the operation of the budgeting, but this would create a constitutional cap. And I spoke to Renee, who's our NCACC rep, about this, and she told me, and she can share with us all, that the NCACC is working on this, that they recognize the significant adverse impacts of something like this. And as the resolution states, you know, the revenue-raising mechanisms that we have are regressive. You know, sales taxes, you know, fees, fines. The options are limited, and they're certainly not as progressive as income tax. So I'm not wedded to any of this language. If folks want to change, tweak, otherwise, I appreciate Barry's edits to a later item to make it more readable. So I will also just note, as many of you probably know, this has been passed in other states. It's called the Taxpayer's Bill of Rights. A TABOR is what ALEC calls it. They've pushed it in states across the country, including Kansas, Oklahoma, and several of the states that have passed this have run into serious funding issues, particularly for education. Oklahoma was actually on a 4-day school week for a while because we couldn't afford the education expenses. So I'd like to suggest we adopt this. I know it's short notice, but again, this is being considered right now, and if we do pass it, to send it to our legislative delegation, to the NCACC, to our colleagues, and as well as other local, you know, other local governments here in Orange County.
You want a motion? So moved. I move that we adopt this resolution, and any changes can be made afterwards, because it's pretty clear from the be it resolved clause is what we want.
Second.
All right, a motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
Two things. One, it might be nice to add a now therefore to request that voters in Orange County oppose this constitutional amendment.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
And the other is that we should call it the wealthiest North Carolinians tax relief bill.
I'll take a friendly amendment to the first one.
All right, there's been a friendly amendment to adding another be it resolved, asking voters to vote, if the bill passes and it's on the ballot, asking voters to oppose it. Do you accept that friendly amendment as the seconder?
Absolutely.
All right, so with that amendment, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Thank you all. Appreciate your willingness to act with alacrity. All right, that brings up item 4I, which was formerly item 11F, sorry, the Orange Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors appointment. And there is one person who signed up to speak to this, so we'll hear from her and then we can have our discussion. Yinka Ayankoya, please come forward.
So I do want to just thank you all for allowing me to come and speak and for your consideration. I just wanted to also mention, as the only African American on the OWASA Board of Directors, that I believe ethnic diversity of the board needs to model the type of environment that OWASA is seeking to create as an organization through our diversity and inclusion plan that we've established for probably like a year now, ongoing. And achieving these ambitious goals are not often achieved when we only pay attention to gender-based representation. And I just wanted you to just consider having an ethical and a more cultural and ethnic diversity board as you make your recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming out. All right. So we are to appoint one person to this board. And I know there's been folks are interested in talking about this, so I'll open the floor for discussion or nomination. Well, discussion and then nomination. Penny, and then Renee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. When we got this in agenda review, we had not gotten one applicant that's in here now, and there was 3 women that were on the original agenda. The chair asked me to do some legwork and speak to the folks that were on here, and I did speak to the 3 women. One of them was no longer interested because she was a foster parent and she was adopting her children, and she felt that she would not have the time. There was another one, Miss Lucy Henry, who I spoke with, who had just started a new job, which she travels in a bit. She wants to keep her name on the list, but she just doesn't know if it fits until she figures out her traveling time. And then I spoke with with Miss Jody Eimers, who, if you look at her application, she has 34 years as a hydrologist for the U.S. Geological Survey. So she's been in water. She is experienced. She's also back volunteering for that for the government. She also attends the Commission for the Environment meetings because she sees the direct correlation between clean water and the Commission for the Environment. So she is very much one of the reasons why she is going to the Commission for Environment, even though she's not on that board, is to hold them to their environmental justice goals, and I think that's valuable. Also, being an ex-OWASA board member, I don't think that a 9-person board with only 1 female on it is what we should be. It's problematic for me. I was on the OWASA board, and there was 2 other women with me. Bernadette Pelissier was one of them, Susie Holloway, and the rest were men. But I think diversity comes in all shapes and forms, and just having 1 woman on the board is not the way that I would like to move forward. I did speak with Mayor Pam Heminger about Chapel Hill, and they have 5 men appointed from, they have 5 seats. Carborough has 2, we have 2, and they have 5 men appointed. And the mayor she said it got by her this time, and she apologizes, and it's not the way she would have voted. She wasn't there at the time when they voted. So with that, I would like to nominate Ms. Jody Eimers for that position, and I think she would be fabulous just from my experience on the OWASA board and her experience 34 years as a hydrologist.
And I'll second that.
All right. Motion has been made and seconded. Renee?
Yeah. Well, I was going to not discuss that motion.
Well, you can discuss anything you want.
Okay, thank you.
Opening up the floor for comments.
Thank you. So I've received, we've got the information here in our packet. I appreciate what Yinka has said, and I've also communicated with Quentin Harper. I knew about one of the other women needing to, she's expanding her family. So I was aware of all that. But I'd have to say that having been in Yinka's situation before, and even now being the only African-American on this board, but even on the planning board when I was the only woman, the only person of color, I think it is important that we show our diversity, our ethnic diversity on our boards, so that we truly so that our boards are truly representative of the community that we serve. Mr. Harper has been on the board before. He's on the board of directors. He's familiar with it, so I would feel very comfortable with putting him back on. And seeing as how it is the pleasure of several people on that board right now that have requested that he be appointed, I would like to nominate him to be on the board.
All right, well, we'll take up this motion,
Right.
and then we'll take up that motion. Other comments? Mark?
Having served on the OWASA board, it took me a pretty good long time to figure out how, what was going on and how to be a good board member. And a lot of that was due to the technical nature of the issues with the utility. And as I look at Ms. Eimer's background and her experience, she is, maybe one of the most experienced candidates that has ever been put up for the OWASA board. And I think that while we all value diversity, we also want to look at putting the best team on the field for the best policy results. And when someone of her caliber comes along, I think we need to recognize that she is a very, very strong candidate. And I also agree with Penny that one woman on the board is out of balance. And this helps address that balance as well.
Barry?
As a former member of the OWASA board, on that board and all the boards that I've ever appointed people to, I've always tried to look at how we can have a diversity, not only an ethnic diversity and a sexual diversity, but a geographic diversity. And underlying all that is you want to have people who are the most qualified. I would point out that the last board that we just appointed to, Ms. Hahn, is a Hispanic person, and so that adds diversity to that board. There are different kinds of diversity, and I think we have done a disservice to several groups over time, and one of those groups is women, and the fact that there are so few women on the OWASA board is very unfortunate, and we can help rectify that with somebody who, as I whispered to Commissioner Markopoulos, when Commissioner Rich said she's been in water for 34 years, I said, I hope she doesn't look too much like a prune.
Other comments? Well, I would just say that, I'm going to support Quentin Harper. I think, for a variety of reasons. One, I think he has been on the board, so he has won't have the same learning curve that you just, as someone who is not on the OWASA board ever and has no desire to ever be on the OWASA board, I can say that, I look at the list and it's filled with people who have technological experience, engineering experience, technologists, water resources, project manager. What I don't see a lot of are community advocates and people who have been working aggressively for the cause of social justice, which Quentin Harper has done. So I'm going to support him. I think he has the experience. I think he brings an experiential diversity to the board. And he's also young, which is something else, is another element that we've tried to engage. And so I'm gonna support his nomination if it gets to that. Any other discussion? All right then. So there's a motion on the floor. I just wanted to add. So I think he's the best qualified overall. That's why I'm supporting him. So there's a motion on the floor to appoint Jody Eimers to the OWASA board. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No.
Can I see hands, please? The opposed are...
Dorson and Price.
Price.
All right, well, that motion passes 5-2. You should have noted from Chapel Hill, they're not just all men, they're all white men.
No, they're not.
Are they? They're
No,
not?
no,
Oh,
there's
okay.
a man of color on there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now we're back to the regular agenda, which is item 6A, which is approval of the 2018-19 budget ordinance.
Mr. Chair, may I interject that there was a question as to who would pick up the cost for the do not resuscitate bracelets and the possible cost, and I was informed they were $5 each. So just a point of information.
And who's going to pay for those? Did you find that out?
I didn't find that out. They were I was notified that it was $5 a bracelet.
Okay. All right, item 6A, Paul Lawton on the approval of the 2018-19 budget ordinance.
Thank you very much, Paul Lawton, Orange County Finance Administrative Services. Agenda item before you is the consideration of the approval of fiscal year 2018-19 budget ordinance, county grant projects, and county fee schedule. On this abstract, there were 4 attachments. First one was the resolution of intent that the board outlined their actions they voted on last Thursday night, last Tuesday night, June 12th. And we took that resolution of intent, and that's how we developed the budget ordinance, which is attachment number 2. Attachment number 3 are the county grant projects for 2018-19, and then attachment 4 for consideration is the 18-19 county fee schedule. I will mention there's a replacement page at your seat, replacement page number 44 in the county fee schedule with a typo that had showed up in there, and it's the kennel permits under animal control. Division of Animal Services, and that fee should be going from $50 to $100.
Okay.
So that is the correction on page 44 of the county fee schedule for consideration of amending that item for the county fee schedule. And that's the only items I have. I'll be glad to entertain any questions that you have.
Are there any questions at this time on the budget? So should we do this as 3 separate votes for the, for the ordinance, the fee schedule, and the county grant projects? Do we do that separately, or do we do it all at once?
Yeah, I believe you can do them all in one motion for the approval of the 18-19 budget ordinance, the 18-19 county grant projects, and the 18-19 county fee schedule.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so the motion's been made and seconded for the budget ordinance, the county grant projects, and the county fee schedule. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Now we go on to item 4B, which is the 5-year capital investment plan for 2018-2019.
This before you is for the acceptance of the 5-year capital investment plan and approval of the CIP projects of $42,130,216 for 2018-19. As you recall, during our work sessions on the CIP, that the CIP is a plan. So you're accepting the plan, but you only approve funding for year 1 of the capital investment plan. So the attachments that you had, attachment 1 in your packet for this item was the overall plan summary for the CIP. As you see, it's years 1 through 5, and then we do a cumulative amount for the out years, years 6 through 10. Attachment 2 specifically goes into the year 1, 18-19 projects for the entire county, including county, the proprietary, and the school capitals. Attachment 3 specifically goes into the individual county capital projects of $28,530,599. And then attachment 4 are the individual school capital approved projects for both of the school systems. And for 18-19, they total $11,115,801. Be glad to entertain any questions you have on this.
All right, any questions about the capital improvements plan? If not, then we will look for a motion approving the, I want to make sure I get the name right, the 5-year capital investment plan and the approval of the CIP projects for fiscal year 2018-19.
So moved.
Second.
All right, that motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. That motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, everyone. We have a budget. It's a girl. All right. Next up, item 6C is the Orange County Consolidated Plan, the fiscal year 2018-19 revised annual action plan, and proposed fiscal year 2018-19 home activities. So you will recall that we've had a couple of public hearings on this as required by the federal home program. And now we are at the point where we are ready to vote on how we're going to spend the home program monies. And so that is the item before us, and to consider approving the home program resolution. And Cheryl Hampton is here.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Just a few things. If you will look at attachment 3, as you said, we've gone through all of our public hearings. We did several of them given the funding increase, and we also, some additional information has come to light, and some HUD regulation changes. And so attachment 3, the rows that are highlighted in yellow show the changes we had to make. The amount of funds remained the same, and that is in the abstract. And so you've seen how we had to make some revisions to the proposed projects. So Community Home Trust would be just from general project funds for $60,000. We had to include a set-aside for our Chodo Community Housing Development Organization set-aside is $60,201. The TBRA for Orange County tenant-based rental assistance was reduced from $150,000 to $139,613. We wanted you to also note that while we deleted housing rehabilitation, single-family housing rehabilitation activities, we will be utilizing CDBG program income and other funds that you have put in our budget to address that. So these are the changes. We have had the public hearings, and we ask if there are no questions that you consider this for approval.
All right, thank you, Cheryl. Are there any questions? So go ahead, Renee.
Just very quickly, it's hard for me to see, where did the 111,000 go?
The 111,000 was the additional money. We had first anticipated getting $289,693. The award is for 401,300. It's on page 2, 401,340. It's on page 2 of the abstract.
So which programs did
we divided it among those that were there. We added the Orange County TBRA. That is a new one. We included a Chodo set-aside, and that is by HUD regs. We have to have that set aside for those type organizations.
Right, because I guess because I'm not seeing what you originally had, it was hard to see where it was
originally had was on what you received on the June 1st that you all approved, and so that's why we have some revisions now.
So you just kind of split it up? Just split it up between the categories?
We didn't. We looked at the needs. We did not make any changes to empowerment, Habitat for Humanity. We put in the tenant-based rental assistance for two things, for two reasons. One is the county is assuming DSS has control for the rapid rehousing, and housing will be working with them to include some funds for the rapid rehousing program and to include additional tenant-based rental assistance in anticipation and eagerly hoping that you all would approve, which you have done in the budget for a local rent supplement. So
Okay, so
that's-
basically it went to that program?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. No, I'm fine with it. I just wanted to see where the changes were.
Okay.
Other questions on this? I mean, just to give you a quick summary, we found out the original Certified Housing Development Organization money we were going to give to the Community Home Trust. We reviewed the HUD regs and found out that it wasn't what they wanted to use it for, wasn't eligible, so we created this other line item, and we'll work on identifying a CHDO that could take that money.
Yes, sir.
All right, if there's no other questions, then there are a couple of the resolutions are at attachment 1, and I think we can probably do all of these at once. So there's a resolution authorizing the submission of the plan, and then there's a resolution authorizing the home program design, and I think that's it.
Authorize the county manager to implement.
Yeah, and then authorizing the county manager. So, would someone make a motion?
So move that we adopt a resolution approving the consolidated plan and the revised home program design, and authorize the county manager to implement the home program design as approved.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. All right.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Ms. Hampton. Good work. Next up, item 6D, Social Services Reform and Performance Memorandum of Understanding. We'll receive an update on social services reform and consider approval of a memorandum of understanding between Orange County and the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services regarding performance expectations, and authorize the county manager to sign. Nancy Costin and Janet Sparks are here, and I know there's a lot of questions about this item, so welcome.
So I'm told.
Thank you. So I'm Nancy Costin. I'm the Social Services Director, and of course, Janet Sparks is here with Child Support. Since ours is a separate department here, that's why we're both here. We're both affected by this. This is part of the famous HB 630 that we've presented to you before. This particular item has to do with a requirement in the law that says we must sign a memorandum. Well, it's changed from a contract to a memorandum of understanding between the county and the state on certain performance agreements that have been worked out by the state. So that is part of that law, and the abstract summarizes for you some of the concerns, and I think it's a balancing act between a law that says we have to do an MOU, and I know that there are issues about things that we are not sure we can meet within the MOU. We have had a lot of conversations with the Department of Health and Human Services about how the enforcement of this would be, because when you read all the way through it, the last parts of the enforcement after corrective action, if those fail, that they actually could come and run the departments instead of us. That is an 18-month to 2 years down the road if you read how the performance would have to be measured. So we're at a position of having to bring those before you and be honest with you that there are a couple of them that will be hard for us to meet. Janet has some and I have some that they're just, child permanency is very hard to do it within the federal timeframes, and almost all of the ones in the DSS side of this are right out of federal requirements. And so the state has met with us and said that they will be coming back to us with targets. So even though the federal requirement might say 41% children have to be done within a certain period, Orange County may be given an individual target that is less than that, and that's what we'd be held to initially. So that's the negotiations we've been in. We've been in a lot of meetings with the department about this. I was at a meeting last week, I think, with maybe 70 county directors were there. None of the counties that I talked to are planning to do anything but sign the MOU, even though they may have reservations about being able to meet the performance, that they consider that to be an issue that we would take up later down the road if it came to that. Nothing is actually new in the MOU from what's already in law that's required of us. It's just, it has a tone that it's kind of difficult for those of us who manage to appreciate. So,
Janet, do you want to add anything?
Sure. These are all things that we want to do. It's that it is mandated in such a way that feels punitive. And you know, we're going to do our best to do the best that we can for children, regardless. This MOU notwithstanding.
All right, thank you. John, did you want to add anything at this point, or before I open it up for questions?
No, nothing right now.
All right. All right, then. So board questions or comments? Earl?
As the board representative for the DSS board, I'm just going to add that having served on this DSS board for a couple of years, I've come to understand a little better the processes and the challenges that our folks face, and it's not unique to Orange County. They are, as was mentioned, doing the best they can with the resources they have, and they're doing quite good work, but the challenges are almost overwhelming. This I view like I would taking medicine that I do not want, and I'm not sure that's going to cure the hurt. But I know there's conversations going on between DHS and the services boards in multiple counties, if not all 100 counties. Yeah, there are extreme reservations on my part, and I think everyone's part, about can we meet these parameters. There are concerns that we cannot meet these parameters, but it was the way the law is written. I do not see how we can avoid signing this MOU, but I can also guarantee you there are efforts on the way to amend this going forward.
Other comments or questions? Barry?
Well, I had asked our attorney in an email whether, since it does seem clear that this may be more onerous than is fair, whether we could write an accompanying letter that expresses our concern that I was just writing as our two staff members were speaking, just something along the lines, and I sent the email to everybody, along the lines that the seemingly punitive mandate includes goals that our conscientious and caring staff identify as seemingly difficult to meet despite their best efforts, and point out that other counties, it was 2/3 of the counties of the state were going to have difficulty meeting those goals, wasn't it?
Child support collections. That was just hers. My guess is in total, I don't know that any county can meet every single one of them. I'll be honest. There may be a few, but everybody I'm around is in the same feeling. Orange County performs well compared to other counties. So when we say we don't think we can meet these, I think you can feel pretty sure that most of my peers and most of Janet's peers are feeling the exact same thing. There are things that happen that are so far out of our control. I mean, it's everything from how much court time do you have, and what happens with the economy. There are so many things that can happen in a several years period that are going to impact all of these. But another piece that the state, and you may want, if you're writing, to mention, is there is an issue with the state not yet having valid data. So some of our measures, they can't give us our benchmarks yet at DSS. Part of it is changing all our systems. I mean, we're moving from legacy to NC-FAST, and some of the measures have never been really put in to be measured. The adult service ones are the ones that actually don't come out of the federal requirements, so the state hasn't tracked as much of that. So they've got to develop a whole process for that. So they tell us the first 6 months at DSS anyway will be about developing those processes, and that in January will be the first time we probably would have valid data for comparison to anybody else.
Thank you. So I would just suggest that we ask the two department heads with the manager's office to write a letter that we authorize that expresses our concerns, because we're probably going to vote for it because we have to vote for it, but just to accompany our vote of approval.
Other questions or comments? So I just want to you said the targets are the ones that you already have. Is that, did I understand that correctly, that they're set by the federal law?
So the things that are in the agreement before you are the federal requirements. North Carolina is under corrective action plan with the federal government for child welfare and has been, I don't know, maybe the whole time I've been a director. Ever since they started doing these particular types of reviews, so are every other state. So everybody's in these corrective actions. And so after you get into corrective action, they come back, even though it may say 50% of the cases have to do X, they come in with a target for each year to move you up. So the target number would be less than the federal requirement. And so that would be what you'd be measured against, is what they're telling us once those are established with each county. In each county, they may do some specialized ones with counties. So if I'm in corrective action, then they might give me benchmarks, you know, for moving forward. And if we were meeting what the new target was, then these other clauses what we're being told now would not come into play if you're making progress on your corrective action plan, which is how most corrective action plans work.
But the federal targets are the same.
They are.
And they've been the same.
Right.
So that's not a new component of there are new things in this, but that's not one of them.
That is correct. So all the child welfare ones are pretty much straight out of federal requirements and are done through those reviews. This document started out being much longer, and the state has cut a bunch of the performance measures out, partly because of the validity of data that they didn't have, and we're saying it's really tough to be told you're about to be held accountable for something that we can't see the number that someone has judged us on. Mm-hmm. So once you have that, you can make a better accounting, but it's a little tough, kind of shooting in the dark on a few of the measures. Some of them we do know, and we know how hard they are to meet.
Penny?
So will the measures or the goals or whatever we're calling them, targets, will they be across the board for every county in North Carolina, or are they going to make different ones up for different counties depending on who they like and who they don't like?
I think our answer
Well, you can take that. You don't have to answer the last part.
I think child support is already individualized.
It is.
Right now, DSSs are not. So the regular things like child welfare and adult services right now, but what I hear them saying is as they look at our situations, they might start, if we're in corrective action. Now, hopefully we don't, get to corrective action on everything, but we will on some of it. Then there would be a target to get us there and to move you forward without meeting the whole federal requirement. The federal requirements are tough. States aren't meeting them. But it's been this way for about at least 15 years, I think. So child support is different, though.
These are our incentive measures. We've had these measures for years. The difficulty is that we don't establish, we don't have any input in what those measures are. The percent of cases under order, your total collections, the percent of cases that have payments toward arrears, the percentage of paternities that are established. We meet most of them, but it's going to be hard to do 5 out of 5 without any input.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or comments? All right. Let's get a motion.
I would make a motion that we follow the recommendation of the manager to authorize the county manager, social service director to sign the memorandum of understanding pursuant to the North Carolina General Statutes 108A-74 and sign any related amendments to the memorandum. And I would add to that Commissioner Jacobs' recommendation that the Director of Social Services and Director of Child Welfare write a letter. And I didn't catch who you were directing that letter to.
Well, I asked that they do it through the manager's office.
Okay.
And I guess we'll direct it to North Carolina Department of Social Services.
I would assume you want it to accompany this, which is due at the Department of Health and Human Services by June 29th.
Yes, that's the assumption I was operating under, but
I would add that into the motion that we direct our directors to write a letter expressing our concerns.
second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the memorandum with the addition of our letter expressing our concerns. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed?
No.
That passes 6-1. Thank you. Next up, item 6E, Memorandum of Understanding with the Town of Hillsborough and Contract for Design, Permitting, and Construction Administration for Orange County Town of Hillsborough Fiber Optic Network. Jim Northup will make a presentation.
Jim Northup, Orange County Chief Information Officer with Information Technologies. Before we started, I just wanted to make a correction that the protocol that the internet runs on was invented and in place in 1983, not 50 years ago. Now, I'd lose my stripes in the IT world, if that was the case. I'd also like to introduce, we have a staff member in the office, Hardik Patel, who's one of our systems analysts. He's on the application side of the team, and he helped put some of the abstracts that you see before you together this evening. Hardik is awesome. If you haven't met him or had him help you with anything, he's just great. He came from Greenville, Pitt County, about 3 years ago. Thanks, Hardik.
Great, thank you for being here.
So, the County IT Department conducted a fiber assessment back in 2017 in an effort to get estimates to connect Orange County facilities with fiber and run past economic development zones, so we can include those numbers in the fiscal year 18 budget. Due to budgetary considerations, we broke this project into 3 phases at about $1.16 million each. One to connect the greater Hillsborough area, one to run east-west, basically to follow 70 from the Eflin Community Center to the almost Durham line, and one phase to connect Hillsborough to Chapel Hill at UNC and then to Carborough. Hillsborough expressed an interest in partnering with the county to see if we could work together to keep costs to a minimum and reach some sort of economies of scale. So it's decided we consider the Hillsborough area as a phase 1 as it coincides with the town's fiber plan as well. Each entity has approximately 14 miles of fiber, and each of those runs has about 7 miles of overlap. So in other words, we have about 7 miles of our own. Hillsborough and Orange County have 7 common miles, and then Hillsborough has about 7 miles of their own. A request for quotations for Phase 1 engineering and construction management was put out back in November of 2017, and members of Asset Management Services, Financial Services, IT, and the Town of Hillsborough interviewed multiple respondents, and we landed or chose Columbia Telecommunications Company, which is the contract that you have before you, along with the draft memorandum of understanding with the Town of Hillsborough. We'll be working on finalizing the remaining details on both the MOU and the contract and the interrelationship between the two. You really can't have one without the other because the contract that you have before you basically is dependent on funding from Hillsborough. And we got the MOU back from Hillsborough at a late date, so we're kind of working out all the details. That's why it was the manager's recommendation is contingent upon an attorney review.
All right, are there any questions about this item for Jim or the manager or the attorney? So do we know what the status of Hillsborough's consideration of this is?
So, yes, they gave the MOU back that had questions, but the general consensus is that it'll be a 50-50 split, and that seems to be fair, but until we actually sit down with them and work out the numbers, it might be a 49-51 split, but it's basically to share costs throughout the whole, for the whole project. And mainly it's sharing costs for the consolidated or the overlap section, whereas the 7 miles for Hillsborough will be their cost, and the 7 miles for Orange County will be our cost. So, but the contract is all encompassing of all of those miles. And so Hillsborough is looking to be a fair partner with the county, and that's been the intent. The deputy manager and I have met with the town manager and their financial services director. at least once, I believe, and we have a meeting in July scheduled to kind of hammer out the final details, again, with the attorney's review and the manager's review, of course.
All right, any other questions about this? All right, then, the recommendation is that we approve the MOU and the contract and authorize the manager to sign the MOU based on final review by staff and county attorney, and contingent upon the final approval and signature of the MOU, to approve the manager to sign the contract with CTC in the amount of $383,688.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion has been made and seconded to accept the manager's recommendation. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, item 6F. Topics and county commissioner roles for the 2018 Orange County Economic Development Summit. Board will review, amend as necessary, consider approving suggested topics for the 2018 Economic Development Summit and panelists for each hour of a 4-hour radio broadcast. There is a, in the abstract, there's a suggested or proposed breakdown of the 4 hours with topics and blanks for commissioners. And we'll hear from Todd, and then we can discuss. And I think, well, let Todd speak first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Todd McGee, the Community Relations Director. We have been meeting for the last couple of months with Steve Brantley, his staff, and also with representatives from WCHL, and getting feedback from y'all. And this is kind of the slate of speakers that we've come up with. When we first came up with this idea, we had 4 hours, and my thoughts were, how in the world are we going to spend 4 hours, fill 4 hours? And then after speaking with y'all, getting feedback from y'all, talking to Steve and his staff and the radio folks, we came to the conclusion 4 hours was probably not enough time to cover everything that we would like to cover, because there's so many things that we're doing to enhance economic development in the county through y'all's leadership, through what the residents asked the county to do when they approved the Article 46 sales tax, with part of that going to economic development. So we've come up with this slate of topics and panelists for y'all to consider. And then the big thing for y'all to do tonight also is to determine what role, if any, each of you would like as individual commissioners, or the board may want to decide as a whole if the commissioners want to be active panelists or more active listeners. That is totally up to you guys. So if y'all want to just kind of go through it hour by hour, we can do that, or however y'all would like to do it.
All right, so there's this outline of the hours. I think I would say that we could, those are up for discussion as well. Really want to get some input from the commissioners on this sort of outline of the program. And then, you know, to the extent we resolve what that will look like, if they're, you know, whether folks want to be panelists or moderators or something else, we could, that's all open for discussion now. So.
And I say most of the panelists that you see, the names, are actually people we have spoken to and confirmed that they're willing to participate.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Earl.
Yes, or is the intention that we would pick one of these if we would prefer a certain segment?
Yeah, I think that is one of the intentions, but also so certainly we could do that. You could also pick whether you'd want your role to be as a panelist or something like a moderator. I mean, I think that's open, and also if we think this breakdown is what we want to cover.
Yeah, the breakdown looks good. I don't have any issues with the way the breakdown, the way it's set up. From my standpoint and the limitations I experienced during daytime, I think for me it would work better on hour 4. And I'll just go ahead and start the ball rolling by saying that unless someone else wants it, I'll take the first segment in hour 4.
All right.
I'll defer to anyone else that would want it.
You are always very gracious,
Thank
my
you.
friend, and we appreciate that. Penny?
Yeah, I'd like to do the tourism hour 3, the first segment of that. Being on the Visitors Bureau for almost the entire time I've been on this board, I think I have a lot to share with that conversation.
First segment.
First segment in hour 3.
So, other comments, Barry?
I probably most people would figure out, be interested in hour 2. Sue Ellsworth is the assistant manager. Have we talked to the manager and he's okay with this at PFAP? Okay.
So I have some questions. I feel like there's something missing from the program. And, you know, I know this is what I would consider a fairly traditional economic development profile. And I would be interested in having some discussion, and I'm not sure where it would go, maybe in a segment, or maybe it'd be a separate section, about that puts some context around economic development. So I think, you know, we know that it impacts housing availability, I mean, access to employment, something that reflects the, you know, the inner connection between all, you know, tourism and business recruitment and, you know, the arts, that puts some perspective around some of the, for want of a better term, the social service or the other elements that that are significantly impacted by economic development. So like underemployment or unemployment or the cost of housing and how that's impacted. I'm not sure we need 2 separate segments on tourism. I think that those 2, nothing against the Visitors Bureau, but I think those 2 that are in hour 3 seem like they could be one. Sort of specialized tourism could just be talked about generally with tourism. In some ways, it's more interesting to me because I think people sort of know what tourism is in the big picture, you know, hotels and people coming for sporting events and things like that. So I would be open to, and I would ask you all if you wanted to come up with something, or I'd be happy to try to, I mean, I'm not sure I can think of it right now, but something that encompasses, you know, kind of a, you know, just some context around economic development and how it impacts the lives of residents, and particularly given, you know, the economic stratification we're experiencing. That's my suggestion. Barry?
No, I think it's a very good suggestion. There's not that there's anything wrong with this schedule, but it doesn't have body. And, you know, to add to the points that you made, it has a major impact on transportation. It has a major impact on land use, water quality. There needs, I think, there needs to be, and also I'm sure that'll happen within the individual segments, but it might be worth talking about how we envision this to work in the future. You know, we do have the Article 46, and we have other resources, and maybe to articulate some kind of vision of, as you say, how it all fits together and where we think we're going, so that it's a whole, because we do incentive projects with municipalities. That's, you know, so it's a more active, maybe it fits in industrial recruitment, but it's a more active component that fits into that bigger picture that you're talking about. And I know in the central part of the county, we're always talking about underemployment. And so, you know, all those things, maybe we could create some kind of mental matrix, not a written matrix, but I think that's where you're going, and I thank you for bringing that up.
Mark? And then Penny?
I agree too that I noticed that there was something missing. I think part of what I see missing that may fit in with what you're talking about is like just regular working people. You know, when they look at this and they see the creative economy, you know, it's sort of, you know, not that there's not lesser paying jobs open to people with less training in all these categories, but they all have sort of an air of, you know, for the college educated, for the, you know, people who have had the resources to, you know, become an artist, or you know, of course, local food systems, that's, that appeals to folks who can go out and just start working. You know, from my perspective, running a small construction company, knowing that if there was training for young people, they could train for a few months and turn around and make $15 to $20 an hour doing something that's satisfying and that is really needed in the county. And, you know, we talk about people leaving the county. There's a lot of jobs here in the trades that would keep people in the county. So I'd like to see a focus on some of those issues as well.
Penny?
Yeah, I really like your idea also, but certainly I agree with but the two tourism, I think they could be together. I mean, that conversation is just going to bleed into each other anyway. But I think what you're saying, though, I would like to see almost at the end, though. So, you know, we're talking about sort of nice and fluffy stuff, but here at the end is where, you know, you're hitting it up with, and you're tying it all together, but you're also putting it at, you know, this is like you're saying, it's not only now, it's future, it's what we're planning on. I think Barry said talk a little bit about a vision. So I like the idea. I think it's great. I think that it needs to be developed a little bit more, but I think I would put that at the very end.
Earl?
Yes, I was going to suggest to put it at the beginning, but I believe the end is the better place for it to wrap it up. And to go along with what you say, you could tie the two segments of tourism together, simply add another segment at the end to wrap up, and use what has been suggested by various members to basically to tie up the package at the end.
Renee?
Well, I kind of think that there needs to be something at the beginning that ties in so that people will want to listen. You know, what is, I mean, just like with a book, I mean, when you start reading it, you have an idea of where it's going. You may not know what the end is going to be, but you know, you've identifying the theme, and I think it needs something just, you know, other than economic development. Because those are two words that, you know, in general don't really, I mean, unless you're an economic development wonk, you know, it's not really going to perk, well, it can perk your interest, but I think it's a little less sexy than something else, you know, another title.
Well, we will be doing extensive promotion leading up to it with the radio station, and Aaron Keck will be the moderator. So in his introductory comments, he will set the stage for what we're here for, what the, you know, he's not just going to jump straight in and say, okay, now we've got Katie Murray here with us from the Arts Commission. He would set the stage, and that may be an opportunity too for either Steve or the chair maybe even to make some comments at the very beginning representing, you know, what it is that we're trying to accomplish here.
Well, I mean, this is just my opinion. You know, nobody has to listen, you know, pay any attention to him. I just think that, that, you know, the two words, I mean, specialists can tell you, well, I mean, have told me anyway, that, you know, certain words can be more attractive than others to get people to really, you know, listen within that first 5 seconds or 7 seconds that you want them to listen. And I don't know, I just think it would even help us if we kind of knew what the overall scope was going to be, if it, you know, where are we going with this 4 hours. The other thing that I would suggest is because it's kind of difficult to push the arts so much as in terms of economic development, that you might want to put that a little, maybe hour, 2 or 3, or even 4, I don't know, to put it first, because even at NACO, you know, we're disguising, we've had to disguise the arts in a way, but then we do get a big, you know, a full house with our programs, but of course we do have kind of arts. We have an artist, a pretty strong artist community here, so it may be fine. But I don't know. I just agree with Mark Dorson that I think we need to identify something in the beginning.
And we've also just organized these with the understanding that the audience will get larger as the afternoon progresses, people in their cars driving home. So the 5 and 6 and 6 and 7 hours are going to have more people than the 3 and 4 and 4 and 5 hours.
Now now I got a criticism because I'm into the arts and I would want people to listen to it.
I think we should have 15 minutes at the beginning to frame out some context and how this all fits together and talk about some of these things, and then a half hour at the end to bring it all back together to the points that everyone's making and the future piece. And so you could shave 5 minutes off of each hour and get 15 minutes up at the front, and that could be, I mean, I'd be happy to do that section, or someone else could. And then you take the half hour out of hour 3, I think, and add a half hour at the end. That's not just a summary, but again, going back to the context of, how does this affect broadly all these interrelated goals the county has? And I think Mark's points about, again, employment, working people, and how that all fits together is really critical.
So would a possible ending be all of the commissioners on a panel for like the last 15 minutes to talk about the future with perhaps Steve? Or would you rather, and that's a lot of people in 10 or 15 minutes trying to weigh in, would you rather?
I think it should be a panel, just like these other ones, but maybe we have someone from, someone from the housing community, someone, maybe
Transportation,
maybe from Durham Tech, maybe
the schools.
Yeah, the schools.
I mean, we can kind of brainstorm that.
Yeah, we'll put that together. We can put that
I
together.
can think, maybe someone from DSS, they're doing all kinds of job-related.
Right.
I mean, we can think about that, but I think that
We can
it
put
ought
that
to be
together.
yeah.
Okay, so we can do that. So I think it would make sense to have you be the person at the beginning and then at the end also as chair.
I would appreciate that responsibility. Penny?
So these are going to run though more than once, right? So we're going to do this live, but WCHL will keep running them, right?
Well, it'll be on their website as for download for
So you
listen on
can
demand.
listen, okay.
Yeah, it won't be repeated on the radio, but it will be.
No, I'm just in reference to what Commissioner Price is saying, that she's interested in the art. She would want to hear the earlier one, but as long as there's the ability to go back and find it and listen to it, stream it, then that's fine
and
also.
we will also broadcast this on the cable access channel, and that will be repeated. So
that answers that. That's good.
No.
Not everybody has the cable
No,
access channel.
my thing was that, I would want a lot of people to hear about that, because he was saying that as time goes on, more people would listen. But it's fine however it goes.
Mark?
I'd say we don't have to achieve ultimate perfection the first time around, right? I think we got a pretty good idea. Let's do it, learn from it, and hopefully make it an annual event. I mean, it could turn into a really good annual program. So I think we just dive in and do it this year and see what we learn from it and make it better.
Okay.
All right, so it sounds like there's general consensus on having 15-minute intro at the front and a 30-minute panel at the end, collapsing the tourism ones into one. Penny wants to be the tourism person. Earl wants to be the item 4.1. I presume, Barry, you were suggesting you wanted to be the hour 2 person? And Renee, did you want to be the arts person?
Not necessarily.
Okay, well, do you have a preference?
No.
There's like musical chairs, because now there's 6 slots, right?
Yeah. So you all do it.
Yeah, no, there's 6 slots, but there's 7 slots still.
Another one, yeah.
We took away one and we added one.
Commissioner Burrows passes.
All right?
No, I'll pass. Go ahead.
No, I'm not interested.
You're not interested in participating at all?
No, I don't need to. There's no.
Well, there's a slot for you.
I know. That's why I'm pointing out to you that you have some flexibility because I passed.
There's no passing. This is designed for everybody to participate. You're still a commissioner until
I am
December
still a commissioner.
2nd, or whatever it is. So you're giving me authority to sign you one as the chair? Or are you saying that you do not want to participate in
I'm
this at all?
saying I don't know how to participate.
All right. All right. Well, that's unfortunate. Mark, did you have a preference?
Take any one that's open.
All right, well, here's what's open right now. The arts, the entrepreneurial, and the industrial recruitment.
I'll go with recruitment.
All right.
Give me an opportunity to learn more about that.
Okay, so that leaves right now the arts and the entrepreneurial economy. Do you have a preference for one of those, Renee?
I guess I could do the arts.
What?
The arts is probably the most appropriate for me.
All right.
Most copacetic.
Copacetic. Yeah, I am the vice chair of the
I could
Arts
pick
and
up an
Culture
extra one if you
Commission.
want.
We'll figure it out.
Was head
If
of
someone
the
wants
Arts
to pick
Council.
up the entrepreneurial one, they can. Or we could have a staff person fill in.
Well, you're somewhat entrepreneurial.
Yeah, but I'm already doing one. I'm already doing 2, actually.
He's doing 2.
But, so, I want to, I could certainly do it if no one else wants to do it, but we'll figure that out. All right, anything else on this item? Do you all feel like you have good direction on adding that
I believe
final
so.
segment
Yes,
and an introduction?
yeah,
All
we
right.
can do that. We'll put it together.
All right, very good, excellent. All right, thank you. All right, next up, there are no reports, so we're on to the consent agenda, and I know there's lots of items that people want to pull, so if you have an item you want to pull from the consent agenda.
I did, but Mia mentioned it in announcements.
All right,
I'd like to pull one.
go ahead, which one?
8R, please.
R. Okay. Barry, did you have a couple you wanted to pull?
Yes. Well, I don't know if we want to pull the public charge, but that would be D.
Yeah, I think we should, because I think you've proposed revising what was in the packet, so I don't think it'll be long, but
Okay. And I have a question about G, and then I'd like to pull L.
G and L, okay. Are there any other items so right now we've got D, G, L, and R. Any other items? Renee, you resolved the one that you were?
I was just going to highlight the Family Success
Oh,
Alliance.
right,
the
okay, but
Keenan-
we already did
Yeah,
that,
we
so.
did that.
We're on top of it.
All right, so that leaves the remaining items, A, B, C, E, F, H, I, J, K, M, N, O, P, Q, S, and T.
So moved.
All right? Motion's been made and seconded for those items. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Now we'll go on to the pulled items. First one is 6D. Barry. I mean 8D, sorry.
8D. Well, I just proposed some changes that I hoped made it more succinct and less repetitious.
Yeah, do you want to read those changes? Do you have that in front of you?
I do not, because my computer shut down while we were
It
talking.
should be at your places, I think.
Oh, it's at the
Orange,
places.
orange page.
It has
Not
the
that.
orange. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Salmon.
You want me to read it? Or everybody has it?
Yeah, everybody has it. So you see, The changes suggested by Barry are at the bottom, which I think, just takes out a lot of the wordiness and the repetitive stuff. Any questions about this? All right, Commissioner Jacobs, you want to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion that we revamp the public charge to reflect the bottom version on this. I guess it's the second version on this. What color is this?
Peachy.
Peachy page.
Second page.
All right, motion's been made and seconded to adopt the changes suggested by Barry over the original changes suggested. That's the charge that's at the bottom of the front of the item at your places. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0.
Comment?
Yes.
I just want to thank you all for doing that, because I know that charge was bugging you for a long time. And so thank you for taking the lead on that, and for Barry helping out, and Mia also sent some changes over. So thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for doing that. All right, next up, Barry, you had a question about item 8G.
Yeah, my question was just what were the criteria for choosing these roads? Because if there's no roads in Cedar Grove Township, and Eflin Cedar Grove Road is a road that people use for recreational purposes, and the same with Orange Grove Road going across Cheeks and Bingham. So I just wondered how we decided, or is this the total universe of signs?
This, no one is here right now to answer that question. What I do know is that this did go through the outboard, and that that they were approving this, so we can get more information on that. We can pull this and get more information if you'd like.
I don't want to delay it till September, but
Yeah.
I would just suggest that we tentatively approve those two pending the review of what the criteria were.
Yeah, and we'll send out all that information to all the commissioners. We'll get it to you tomorrow.
Mark?
I would specifically ask about Orange Grove Road. I drive that all the time. As a matter of fact, that's where somebody ran a bicyclist off the road and hit him.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that's a thoroughfare for superhighway for bikes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised it's not on here.
Me too.
All right, so what is the proposal, to approve this, or to, with the idea of potentially adding those two roads, or to not approve this until we get more information?
It's too, well,
I would approve it.
yeah, I would
pending.
approve it with the tentative inclusion of those two roads, subject to some objection from the outboard or the staff.
Yeah. We'll send what the criteria was and how they determined these, and then we'll also tell them that these are two roads that we want considered for signage.
All right?
Did you move
So,
that, or did I? Did you move that?
So that's a motion.
Okay.
And I'll second it.
All right, so the motion has been made and second to approve this, get information about adding those other two roads. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that passes 7-0. Now we're up to 8L, approval of food and organic waste collection and composting contract.
And I will say that solid waste staff has been waiting all this time, because I pulled this item. Let me preface my remarks by saying that the Solid Waste Advisory Group discussed at our last meeting trying to accelerate our approach to gathering food waste. We talked about how in September we would start looking maybe more aggressively at what our goals are, as we're doing an updated plan for the county's solid waste. And having had interactions with Ms. Brooks, she's a very nice person. She does a very good job. We rely on her efforts. But my concern was that I wanted to make sure if we're going to try and do something more aggressive than what we're doing now, which is essentially just having Brooks Company come and take the food waste, that we want to make sure we still have the opportunity to do so. And so I asked Mr. Williams to just come. He assured me that there's enough flexibility in the contract to do both, but I just wanted the board to hear that and understand that, because this is going to probably be a several-year process, and Commissioner Markopoulos and whoever else goes on the Solid Waste Advisory Board is going to need to deal with this.
Right. So Robert Williams, Director, Solid Waste Management. Good evening, Board. So Commissioner Jacobs asked some interesting questions. So in the contract, the contract does call for expanding services to businesses, multifamily units, and especially Orange County schools. We're also looking at enhancing our program with the solid waste plan. So we won't leave anything out. The important thing to remember is with the organics, we have to have a process and a place to store it and a place to remove the final product, which is compost. So that is a long-term, multi-year plan, but we will include that inside the solid waste plan.
Other questions about this item?
Well, I'll move approval, and thank you for staying.
Absolutely.
Second.
All right, you should have told me that you were here. We would have moved this up, the agenda.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Nah, I'm at your service.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded to approve item 8L. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. The next item pulled was item 8R. And that is Penny.
Yeah, so this was a request by the ABC Board to be able to give their director a salary raise, and it was up to 4%. And I thought it seemed a little bit high, and the optics of it didn't look good because we're giving our staff, employees, and the other towns are working on a 2%. So I spoke with Travis this afternoon, and then we spoke with Greg Jarvis, who's the chair of the ABC Board. And then he informed us that the salary, as the director, has to be within the clerk of court salary range, and that, but our board can give an approval to go higher. From the time that the abstract was written, the salary for the clerk of court did go up, as you can see in paragraph 2 of the handout that you have that I put at your place. So that went up. So he's starting. The director's already starting at an advantage, and so Chair Jarvis and I spoke it. We worked it through, and we would like to change that recommendation that the manager and the board approve the ABC Board's request to exceed the statutory limits on the general manager's salary by up to 2% now, not 4%. And you can see that in the third paragraph of that conversation. So he would essentially be getting more than a 2% raise because he's going to start at the new salary, but they want to be able to go up to 2%, and because 4% just was not something that I was going to agree to, and I thought it didn't, that gave the option of almost getting 6% if it went through. So is everyone kind of following what I'm saying?
It makes sense.
You're asking for a 2% increase, but he's already getting he's already gotten a $2,000 raise, so he's still getting the 4% potentially.
Potentially, it's up to 2%. So he has to hit all these targets before he gets up to the 2%, which if you look in the original packet there, it's probably, the average is probably going to be about 3.4%. But if we kept it at the 4, they could have possibly gone much higher.
Right, but my question is, your concern was that everybody in the county is getting a 2%, and so this person shouldn't, so that should be the limit? Was that your concern? Because that's not the limit now.
But the way that Travis explains to me, and Travis, you might help me with this also, is that people are getting 2% raise in the county, but that's on top of the bonus that they're getting. So some folks would actually be getting more than a 2% raise. It varies from the different, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
So included in the budget, there's a 2% cost of living adjustment that is applied across the board. And then in addition to that, there's a merit increase that will be applied to an employee's base salary, up to the equivalent of $1,000 annualized in a year. So for an employee in and around the same salary level as the ABC Board General Manager, that'd be about 1%. So a similarly situated county employee who earns an exceptional performance rating equivalent to $1,000 would get, in addition to the 2% cost of living, another 1%, so a total of 3% annualized over the next year.
So this falls more in line with that than if we give them up to 4%. Also, they have to come back every year now because this director will be hitting this every year. He'll be hitting this cap every year. So this is only for this year that we're making this decision, and every year moving forward, they would have to come back with, and we would have to approve the percentage.
Any other questions or comments on this? So we're basically approving the potential for a 4% raise from what he makes now.
That's correct. I was assured that they've never given anyone a 4% raise.
All right, so you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I make motion that we approve this with the correction of the general manager's salary by up to 2% as opposed to 4% that's in the abstract.
And, excuse me, if you could specify that that's just a one-time approval.
One-time
for
approval.
This fiscal year.
For this fiscal year, yes. Thank you, John.
Second. All right, the motion's been made and seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? No. That motion passes 6-1. All right, we're up to the county manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and County Commissioners. I've got two issues I wanted to bring to your attention tonight. The first one, at the June 5th meeting, there was a petition during public comment regarding the Mountains to Sea Trail and potentially creating a Mountains to Sea Trail advisory group. I wanted to and they requested that the decision come back by June 19th, which is tonight. And in talking with staff and also in Chair, Vice Chair, we looked at the Parks and Recreation Committee and looked at expanding their scope. Right now, every Parks and Recreation Committee agenda does include an MST line, and so they're also looking at that. I will be attending their meeting on August 1st to talk with that advisory board about this and about actually being a little more active on that rather than creating another committee. So I just wanted to share that with you, and also for anybody who from the Mountains to Sea, Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail, to let them know we haven't ignored that. We're working on that, and we will have more information in September for you, but we're going to work through the summer on this and make sure that it just works how we did with the other committee when we did this before. The other thing, just a reminder, Thursday night we have the transit-oriented development meeting with Durham Board of Commissioners in the Board of Commissioners chambers at 7 o'clock, and I just wanted to let you know that the first, we haven't seen an agenda yet, but the first item on the agenda will be the update on the Durham Orange Light Rail project, and I just wanted to share that with you. And that concludes my report this evening.
Penny, you have a question?
Yeah, when are we going to see an agenda? And who's creating the agenda?
We have asked Go Triangle if they know where there's an agenda, but we have not seen an agenda at this time.
We've been trying to get a phone call with the chair and vice chair of the Durham County Commissioners and Go Triangle to create that agenda, and hopefully that will happen tomorrow. We're trying, it's been difficult.
Yeah.
Earl?
That was actually going to be my question, and I would go further and ask that it be delivered to us by tomorrow night.
We'll do our best.
I mean, I'm very concerned about walking in to a joint meeting having no idea of where it's going.
You and all of us, I think.
Yes, I mean, I know I'm expressing reservations of everybody.
Yeah,
but,
yeah,
in
we've
fact,
been.
I had asked, I had phoned the assistant manager today to ask, had I misplaced, overlooked, or just didn't know where to look for it?
We share your frustration, but we're working on it.
Yes,
And
thank you,
hopefully
thank
we'll
you.
have something tomorrow. Other questions on that? Any other questions on Bonnie's report? John, County Attorney's report?
A few things tonight, and I'll deal with something you heard in public comment. So first is some clarification. You asked for an investigation. Is that into deck and septic issues at that Arboretum facility?
Since I'm the one that asked for, I don't think I termed it an investigation, but that's what it amounts to. Yes. If it is designated and permitted as a 3-bedroom, and it is being now advertised as a 4-bedroom, and I did say allegations. I think that this needs to be looked into.
Understood, and you know, given that, Dave Stansel has just sent me an email asking for clarification on what the board was looking for, but I do feel like I need to give you some unsolicited opinions. Currently, your staff, your deeper staff, are working with the landowner to try and resolve the issues on the property. They continue to do this, and to this point, the landowner has indicated a willingness to come into compliance if there is a discovery by your staff that they are out of compliance. I have a concern that if I feel like you're going to continue to get complaints about this, and I have a concern that I want you to be aware of, that if the board keeps, or again in the future, just directs an investigation about whatever the neighbors are complaining about, that willingness by the landowner to continue to work with county staff may evaporate, and we absolutely will end up in court. And court is the only way really to enforce easement terms against an uncooperative landowner. Right now, we're not guaranteed to go that way, but that is possible, and if he feels that staff are being circumvented, that could certainly escalate.
Well, my intent wasn't to circumvent staff. I mean, what I wanted to know is, what are they doing already? I mean, these complaints have been made previously, and so if there is an investigation going on, if there is, folks working to ensure that the terms of the easement are being complied with, I mean, that's the information that I wanted to bring back, and so.
So there was a meeting scheduled with the owners group, I guess, on Thursday. That got canceled for that day, but I anticipate it will be rescheduled. I will ask deeper staff to give you an update of where that is. The other thing I wanted, if there are no other questions about that point.
I have one.
Well, and I have another one. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think we need for our staff to reassure us that the uses are consistent with the conservation easement, because that comes up every single time that the neighbors raise concerns. And so we just need to address it, hopefully once and for all, but at least take it head on and say, this is okay or not okay based on this.
And I think there is a meeting scheduled later this week with at least one of the neighbors to try to address some of that. But that's a reasonable request, and I think your staff can do that.
Well, I'm glad that Barry mentioned that because I do think it is broader than just what we heard tonight. The other thing is, I think it would be helpful for you or to ask deeper to share with us and the public, to the extent it can, all this can be shared, is what the process is. That is, we've received complaints that staff is, deeper or planning or whoever's doing it, and if they find the lack of compliance, what the steps are. There's attempt to mediate and bring the person voluntarily into compliance, and then, sort of how that goes and what a timeline potentially looks like. I mean, I think there's clearly a perception that we're not doing anything.
Right.
And it doesn't sound like that's true. So I think we have an obligation to inform the public, A, what we are doing, and B, what we are authorized to do, sort of what the process is. And
So I did some of that at the community meeting. I'd be glad to do it more publicly or, make it available online. But what I said then was not verbatim, but essentially a complaint's made to deeper staff. Deeper staff will conduct an investigation. They'll work with the landowner to, if they determine there's something that's not in compliance with terms of the easement, they'll work with the landowner to try to get that into compliance. In however many years they've been doing this, there's not been a situation where a landowner did not come into compliance. If the landowner refuses or can't, then you're looking at an injunction or some other form of litigation. But that's the process. I believe that's what I communicated at that community meeting, and we'll get that communicated again.
And I think if you could have some kind of like timeline as to sort of, so here's the process, here's where we are in it, this is the time, we hope this will be finished by this point,
That may be a little more difficult because each situation is going to be different.
Right.
But certainly deeper staff may be able to come up with something like that for each one. If there's nothing else on that one, just one other point on this issue. So you also keep hearing that people want a zero tolerance policy for your conservation easements. And I've talked to Dave Stansel about that, and I think we both agree that would be a very bad idea if you want to continue to get conservation easements. Your staff work very closely with the landowner to ensure that you have a document that does prohibit some things, but also retains the flexibility to allow the landowner to have multiple uses on the property to benefit the landowner. If you get to a point where landowners become aware that you're going to have a zero tolerance policy for enforcement issues, you may have quite a few people who were previously willing to grant a conservation easement not grant a conservation easement. You may lose that going forward. Again, Dave Stansel and I talked about that quite a bit, and he may be able to give you some other information about that if you have some questions. But that is a concern that we share, that zero tolerance is not appropriate for these types of situations.
Right.
And I would add that the phrase zero tolerance has been poisoned by the president, so we should try and avoid it.
That's true.
All right, anything else, John?
No, that's it.
I had one question, I wanted one point of clarification. You sent out an email today or yesterday about new legislation.
Yes.
And there's a couple of bills that you described as ratified, but I'm not sure the governor has signed.
Right.
So I just wanted to be clear that those, I know like the Farm Bill, and I know there were a couple of others that one about the schools being able to sue the counties.
I think everything I sent today has been ratified except the land use, the real serious land use one that allows, it would actually be helpful for the county in one respect, but I can go into that another time. I think everything had been ratified. Ratified means both houses have passed it. The governor has not signed those, but given the veto-proof majorities, I don't anticipate any of those won't ultimately become law.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was reading that right. All right. Now we come to item 11, appointments. First up is the Adult Care Home Community Advisory Committee. This again is that committee where the interested applicants have to get by state statute, have to get some training before they can take a seat on the board. There's one person has gotten the training, and they're being recommended for an additional term. I would note that right now it looks like 50% of this board is vacant.
Yes, they have had several resignations for various reasons, and they have assured us that they are recruiting, and hopefully they will be able to bring something back in September.
Do we know if anybody's going through the training process now? Like, do we know if there's a queue?
They have not let us know anything yet, but we could ask, we could find out. But we're hoping to shoot up for, they told us, hopefully for September, to bring some of these back.
And is there any requirement for these boards to have a minimum number of seats? I mean, this one is half empty. And so are there any requirements that quorum or otherwise for a board like this? Do you know? Do you know?
I do not know.
John, do you know?
I do not have their bylaws in front of me. I do not know. But we can check. We can check. Because I assume, I'm assuming that they're still meeting on a regular basis. We have not heard otherwise, but we'll double check.
And we might also want to look at who sets the size of this board. I know it has a statutory component, but maybe it's too big given the training requirements that are imposed. Renee?
It's also, the time of day might be awkward as well. I think they meet like 3 in the afternoon. So Mia's shaking her head. Well, when I went to the meeting, it was like at 3 in the afternoon.
All right.
Well, maybe we just note this for our work session on boards, because it is troubling seeing a board that's half vacant. And so, all right, well, we've got one person recommended who's gone through the training.
Nominate Ms. Brown.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Ms. Brown nominated for position 8. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Next up, item 11B is the Agricultural Preservation Board. We've got 5 recommended nominations, and there will be 1 vacancy if we fill all those seats.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I'd nominate Nels Anderson, position 5, Richard Van Hook, position 8, Kathy Shamley, position 11, Ken Dawson, position 15, Ashley Parker, position 14. I know all these folks, and I think they'd make good members.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded, and I believe that's everybody who is, I don't think there's even a name in consideration for that last vacant seat. So a motion has been made and seconded for the recommended slate for positions 5, 8, 11, 15, and 14. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Next up is item 11C, which is the Alcohol Beverage Control Board. And I'll note that there are, at this point, we have 2 positions to fill, and then we have to appoint the chair following that. So,
I like to.
Go ahead.
Nominate Patrick Burns for position 1, Jane Cousins for position 2.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded for Patrick Burns for position 1 and Jane Cousins for position 2. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Now we need an appointment to the chair. Renee?
I'd like to nominate Keith Bagby for the board chair.
Second.
Okay, that motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Keith Bagby is the chair. We did 11D already. And then we come to, I think what will be the last one is 11E, the Historic Preservation Commission appointment.
I'd like to nominate Terry Buckner. It's an entirely male board, and I think that if we're really committed to folding women into these boards, we should have at least one.
Jamie Grant is on there.
I'll second that.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded. There is one woman on the board, actually.
I missed it.
All right, so the motion has been made and seconded for Terry Buckner. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. All right, that brings us to the end of our 2017-18 meeting calendar. Remind everyone, 7 o'clock at the Durham County Commissioners Meeting Room. And then that'll be the end for the season. And folks, we should carpool if we can, reduce our carbon footprint. All right, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, we are adjourned.